I used to always think I need a new brain. Maybe Costco sells them, but they'd come two shrink wrapped. I only need one. All right. Welcome all. We are in the State Charter School Board meeting, Utah State Charter School Board meeting. It is February 8th at 10:01 a.m. We welcome everyone here. We excuse today our member Olson, who had a prior commitment today and was unable to attend. Member Spiker, whom we understand will join us online for a bit of time. She has to kind of go in and out due to some commitments today. So we will expect that she's online. I don't know if she is currently. Member Spiker, are you online with us yet? All right, we will continue just open bits, but we do have a quorum, and so we're ready to begin with a Pledge of Allegiance, with which Vice Chair Phillips will lead us.
Thank you. Please begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I don't know if we have any public comment today. I didn't see any signed when I came in. On that, Ms. Stevenson, do you know if there are any public comments? You're trying to do 5 things at one time, like always we are doing. I'm suspecting no, but I'll walk back and just take a look.
Stephanie, board member Spiker connected as well.
Yeah, that's important. What's this? We'll do 2. And no. So all's well. Okay, no names at least signed up on that form, so we're suspecting no. But today, Member Cisneros will get us started with a thought. Thank you.
February is frequently thought of as the month of love. So to that end, I would like to address a crucial aspect that contributes significantly to the overall well-being and success of our students. That is the expression of love within the school setting. Although I do not actually have a green thumb, I love plants, especially trees. So please indulge my analogy. As we know, there are many variables to consider when helping a seed to grow into a fruitful, viable, living plant. The obvious things are water and sun, but you also have to be sure that the soil has nutrients, can't be too wet or too dry. You have to place the pot in a place where it gets optimal sun, but not too much. Sometimes the pot needs to be rotated, sometimes the plant pruned. Other times you leave it alone for a few days and trust that it will be fine. And other times it needs constant attention. Raising a collection of different plants in one setting adds even more complexity. Some plants need water every day, others prefer drought. Some plants will vine and weave and grab onto anything they can attach to, while others prefer to grow alone in their pot. Some plants wither with the slightest neglect and spring back to life with just a little attention. Others ignore every single thing you do. There are many variables to consider when helping a child grow into a kind, independent, expressive human being. The obvious are food and electronic devices. But you have to be sure also that their classrooms are nurturing. Can't be too hands-off or too smothering. You have to have a place where the kids get optimal mentoring, but not too much. Sometimes the student needs to be reminded about manners, sometimes reprimanded, and sometimes you just leave them alone for a few days and trust they will be fine. Other times they need constant attention. Raising a collection of different kids in one classroom adds even more complexity. Some students need attention every day, while others prefer to be left alone. Some make friends and are social and grab onto anyone they can get attached to, while others prefer to grow alone in their skin. Some students clam up with the slightest neglect, but spring back to life with a little attention, And like plants, others ignore every single thing you do. One thing I have noticed with both my plants and my students is that they need love to grow. Sadly, love is a word we do not use enough in schools. We love our families and music, we love food, we love boys and we love girls, and of course, we love books. But for some reason, it feels a bit strange to say you love your teacher, or for me to say, I love my students. Maybe it is because the word love is such a tiny word for such an immense emotion. So, what does love mean in the context of a school? Love is not often listed as a crucial building block of rigorous academic environments, yet it's an essential part of meaningful learning. Its importance resonates with both students and teachers. Love in the context of education goes beyond the conventional understanding and extends to the creation of a nurturing and supportive environment. It encompasses compassion, empathy, and a genuine concern for the holistic development of each student. Love in our schools should reflect a pedagogy rooted in that agape love, defined by a commitment to celebrating the humanity of others. A profound love for humanity, coupled with a love of our subject matter and the power of ideas, must be present in order to teach, since teaching requires a love for the people and a love for the world. In Pedagogy of the Oppressed, controversial book, I know, Paulo Freire describes pedagogy as the power dynamics among the student, teacher, and subject of study. He posited that how this power is wielded in the classroom determines the degree to which education oppresses or liberates. Freire equated such learning relationships to love. He staunchly believed that teaching is an act of supreme love, which can be as profound as the literal liberation of the oppressed, or as simple as a glass of water. I personally think love in the classroom means respect, kindness, honesty, taking risks, and allowing for vulnerability. I think love in the classroom means that everyone belongs, feels heard, and is intended to, where everyone can be themselves without having to change for others. In short, people enjoy each other's company and feel happy to be with others. When you love your peers, your teacher, or your student, you want to see them every day, and their energy and your energy are no longer separated. Researchers Wink and Wink once wrote, "What does the face of love look like in a classroom?" It turns out it's highly diverse. The face of love in a classroom can be deep and abiding respect for people and for learning. It can demonstrate safety. It can radiate a freedom to think, to grow, to question. The face of love for learning can be quiet, thoughtful, and reflexive. Love can be lively and fun. Love in the classroom is as diverse and complex as the learners and their needs and the perspectives, experiences, and philosophies of the instructor. Love connects the teacher, students, and curriculum. I will finish with a quote from a charter school director who is literally embracing this concept with 243, Director Tyler Bastian, who recently wrote, "Teach with love, and you teach about everything that truly matters in life."
Beautiful. Thank you so much. What a way to begin. It makes me not want to do anything for a minute, so we can just think about it for a few minutes. And thank you also. I love these thoughts because you all prepare and come with something really thoughtful, something for us to think about. Thank you so much, Member Cisneros. As you read your thoughts too, I think all of us thought of individuals who fit each of those those categories. We could envision that not only of students but fellow educators, others that we know who live that life, who bring love to the work that they do, and we can tell they love it. And you certainly can tell those who do not love what they're doing. So thank you so much. A lot to think about. Yeah, I'm going to talk more about it later. Beautifully done. Thank you so much. Gave us a lot to think about. And I also think sometimes when I listen to the thoughts here, and again today, some of these should be published. They should go in our newsletter, maybe. They should be published somewhere for others to read and enjoy, if others of you are willing to do that. Because well done. Thank you so much. We can inspire a lot of folks. Okay. Well, seemed we'll go from something wonderful to another wonderful. Luckily, it's just not right to the consent calendar because that. But to Director Kramer and his report.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Marie, could you help with a PowerPoint on it? Thanks. Okay.
It does.
Great, thank you for the opportunity to just present a report. So we'll start with the first slide here. And with it, just giving some updates. These would be some team, some staff, we call ourselves team updates. And so the Charter School Strategic Growth and Innovation Specialist position is something that you've been tracking along and even asking for updates on. It came right from our strategic plan that we would, think of something such as this. And so the position really supports our current LEAs and schools through some innovation, but it also looks to outreach to other LEAs that might be interested or individuals that might be interested in chartering with us. And so the position is very strategic. It's underneath the direction of the executive director, and you've been kind of tracking along. We had a process that was very rigorous, supported by the Utah State Board of Education, HR, and they did a great job just kind of supporting us through the process and using the tools that they have available for us. We had 70 candidates that we kind of moved down to 10, and then 8, and then 7, and then 4 that we interviewed, and then 1 that we selected. And in the interview process, Maria and I were the ones that did that. We thought that'd be appropriate. We added in a really great role-playing opportunity where we could see some of the social emotional skill set of all of our candidates, who all really exhibited tremendous skill sets, as you can imagine, in talking through, what does it take to grow and to do it strategically. And so we had a very rigorous process, and it was creative in that one regard and well received by our candidates. Ultimately, and I have permission from her to publicly state it now, is that we've selected Amy Pace. And Amy Pace will be joining us February 26th to fill this position. She even came into the office yesterday just to say hi to some of our team. We were in the office for a meeting. She spent the last 24 years, this is Amy, teaching science to the students and teachers of Utah for both traditional and charter schools. She recently transitioned out of the classroom into a new position as the Strategic Growth and Innovation Specialist, where she'll continue to support teachers and students. She graduated from Southern Utah University with a BS in biology and a secondary teaching certificate. She completed her master's degree, and she's through the Instructional Design and Educational Technology program at the University of Utah. She's excited to use her skills and background in this new position. She loves working with her fellow teachers and school leaders and shares her passion for education. Just a little bit more about Amy, just because we're really excited to have her. She's been very involved with the Utah Science Teaching Association in the past, served 4 terms as a regional representative and 1 term as president. She's also received several prestigious awards: the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science, the Governor's Medal for Science and Technology, the Utah Energy Educator Award, and was selected to represent the United States as part of the Toshiba Leadership Academy in Tokyo, Japan. She currently serves on the Utah Secondary Science Advisory Team for the Utah State Board of Education. She facilitates teacher endorsement courses for teachers and for the Utah Science Teaching Association. She also said she was really proud to be part of the Portrait of a Utah Graduate and being part of that. We're excited to announce that and make that one of our updates for today. So, yeah. We are going through an internal audit with the Internal Audit Department of the Utah State Board of Education. It's routine and regular. Started with a survey that was sent out to staff members. And it is centered on technical assistance, which is professional development. So it's not centered on finance. Sometimes when you hear audit, you think, finance or something operational. This is as it relates to technical assistance and how we, as staff and as a board, are providing technical assistance. And so there are going to be some great places to celebrate. We've already been, you kind of discover what things you're really doing well in this regard. And UCAP, our Utah Charter Access Point, sorry, I caught a little Charter Access Point is a great tool that we use to disseminate a lot of technical assistance. And we're getting a little bit of feedback, right? There's no written report yet until March, but we're getting a little feedback that we're doing some things really well. Obviously, in audits, we're also looking for places to improve, and we're already implementing some of those things. How do we not just provide professional development, but then write down that we provided and notate it, and then it can be shared as you have change in leadership or change in staff, and it carries on. And so that's a possible place for improvement. So we thought it important to update the board that you were aware that we are going through this, that there'll be a report to it in March or April. School year 24, fiscal year 24, and also 226. I think just to note is that as we took leadership reins in October, we've really been working to put together some plans to spend in fiscal year 24, and those plans to spend have continued from January until present. We've spent some, and we've done a good job using the resources that are provided to us, but we just want to state that we're continuing to plan, we're working through, but fourth quarter, we're going to have more spending. I think in the future, you'll see more smooth spending, but this year in particular, we just had to kind of plan, how are we going to do it, use the different protocols that are available to us in the USB-E, which can be a little time-consuming at times, and so that is continued work to plan and spend. And I wanted to make sure the board was aware. So you're like, why aren't we spending all this money right now? Because we're still kind of planning it. You're going to see a lot of it spent in the next quarter. I think what's also special about this school fiscal year is that, and I want to call out Lisa and our staff. She does an outstanding job, not just helping now to manage this year, but to look ahead to next year, because that budget process is going to start, I've been told, like March or April for next year. And we've even done projections through fiscal year 26. And so that's a report of some of the work that we do. And then Utah Charter Access Point, just to call out to Amber on our staff, she was charged with and really took it upon herself to, what do we reflect on, what we can just change and do some refreshing. And so this next slide is just an example of some of Lisa's great work. Just, she has many tools that are available for our disposal as leadership. And the next slide is an example of UCAP and how it's been refreshed. And it just brands us as, Utah. This is noted, recognizable, not just in Utah, but across the nation. It's a license plate that you even have, and we think it's friendly and inviting and really trying to characterize that we're supportive, providing supportive oversight. So we've added that word on the bottom there. There's a lot of coding that goes behind these changes. This is just the front side of it, and that's just some of the work that we wanted to tell you that our team has been doing. There's one more slide, I think, on UCAP. Again, we just try to simplify some things and make it more user-friendly. A lot of, websites and applications now are just really use icons, or they use real simplified. I think one of the initiatives for Amber that she's been incorporating other websites into UCAP so that UCAP becomes a one-stop shop, just a single point. We still are managing an additional website for the State Charter School Board, and then we also have some interaction with USB-Es. So we see a day in the near future where it all comes together into UCAP, and Amber and our team have been working on that. The next slide. I forget why that one pulls in there. Can you go to the next one? I'll come back to that one. Support team. So Maria and I, as we divide out the executive director, associate executive director roles and responsibilities, she oversees the support team. Sometimes I wish that I could be in all of those meetings because they're very dynamic and they're very just how do we continuously improve is always the question. How do we support our board is always one of the central questions. And another one of the central questions, because Marie will report back to me how these meetings are going and the progress that we're making as a support team. And always asking, what does it mean to be a supportive authorizer? Because we're broadly talking about being a supportive authorizer, and we're defining that. And we're also trying to get some tangibles associated with that. You know, what does the tangible support look like? To this third bullet point, reset expectations regarding processes, timelines, rules. You know, I think because we are inviting and that we are available and we have access, we have been getting a lot more off-schedule requests for different things. And our support team is talking about that and trying to figure out how to engage the board in that particular thing. Maria asked if I would just kind of make a comparison to something or a story, because we didn't want to lay out a policy or anything here, but just tell a story of sorts. So we likened, the work that the support team does to parenting. There's research that says that there's 4 parenting styles, and those styles are authoritarian, authoritative, permissive, and uninvolved. And I don't want to talk a whole lot about the 3 that are less ideal, but talk about the one that is ideal. Because the less ideal is authoritarian, where when it comes to rules, you kind of say it's my way or the highway. It might be authoritarian. We don't want to. And maybe if it's permissive, it's kind of like you set rules. There's rules and there's some guidelines, there's some deadlines and some other things, but you rarely enforce those. Might be more permissible parent, right? And we're kind of comparing that to the work that we do. Or uninvolved, you don't know who your LEAs are, your schools are. Authoritative, you put a lot of effort into creating and maintaining positive relationships with your schools and your LEAs. And you explain the reasons behind your rules. And so some of the off-cycle requests, while we really appreciate the conversations and things like that, if they aren't emergency in nature, we are thinking about how to encourage and steer them back into our already approved processes with some timelines and with some board rule or other rules that we have. And so we thought important to share out today that that's one of the things that our support team is engaged in those conversations is, how do we both maintain that we're authoritative and we have rules and deadlines and guides for anything, right? For small school expansion or other things, because we have established kind of way of going about it. We have precedents that we have set. I've heard in years back, how this board really cares about the precedent set. So thanks for letting me just kind of tell a story, so to say, to capture the really dynamic conversations that are happening in the support team. Charter Day on the Hill, it was great. We asked for our staff to reflect on the last 90 days, and 3 of them talked about being invited to the Charter Day on the Hill and how it was just an inspiring day for them. Their testimony just yesterday in a staff meeting was like, it feels so good to be part of this movement, right? It's not just work that we have, it's a movement and it's a mission. And it was just, and you don't get that unless you see students, and you don't get that unless you see the real people doing the real work. And that definitely you see come together at Charter Day on the Hill. It was a great event. Chair Bowles, as you all know, is so gracious and professional in everything that he does, and he was the master of ceremonies, and it was a lot of pride to have him there introducing our, governor, lieutenant governor. Thank you. And so a couple of pictures of Brian in his element, and then the students and they were all over the place. The students were and organized. What we heard back was that they were very, very clean and orderly, and very, very good day. So I'm almost done. These will go a little quicker than the updates, but we always have a slide where we talk about strategic initiatives. And with this, really appreciate that one of the priorities in the strategic plan was making sure that the new executive director had some funds to do the work. I worked with Marie on this, of course, because we co-lead, and we really came to the conclusion that we could use some contracted services for some advocacy strategies and strategic communication. So we started to put out the feelers as to what that looks like, but we aren't experts in communication, although we, put together press release, or we try to do different things, but a real coordinated effort that represents what the board has laid out in the strategic plan. And that high level expertise, we believe, is really going to propel us forward. And then building a strong and capable organization and charter school community. Brian laid on our chair Bowles, laid on our desk like an onboarding manual, and that we could refresh that, because what a tool that would be to hand over when we have new board members, is that onboarding manual. And so that's a way to build a strong and capable organization, is to have such a document, onboarding document. And then also we've started to do some committee work. We're just kind of getting those committees going again. Even prior to this meeting, the finance committee meeting met. And that's another way that we can really maximize and become and continue to sustain a strong and capable organization. The last bullet point here does have one additional slide, and it's because monitoring fidelity to charter agreements is also one of the priorities of this board. And I underlined just here as it relates to governance, right? Who's in charge of the schools? And now I will tell you that we have had some different conversations, requests, ideas. They come in different shapes and forms about mergers. We already knew 3 months ago that potential mergers could be something that we need to really get ahead of. So we've been researching as staff. We've been putting together what could a merger look like, and we feel comfortable enough to share just a broad outline of what this could look like. This is not a policy today. This is not a process that we're laying out today. This is just planting the seed of that beautiful flower, of that plant, that merging. And this is a approval. This is if we were to adopt like an approval. Staff believes that there's a really early part of this, because we can't get a merger process done by tomorrow. That's just not possible. Board rule doesn't allow it. Rule doesn't, statute doesn't allow it. We need to go through a process and in order to create what does mergers look like. And so we could do something really early that looks like that first column. We're working with USBE. We're approving what we send to you in March or present to you in March. And you could see that. Anticipated is another potential goal, that we could get it done in May. That's just where there's a few more iterations. The more that people engage and the more that they work on it, it just takes a little bit longer, right? There's different drafts and iterations. We actually think we could target for June, though, kind of collect all the information, have done enough work with USBE, and by June, that we could receive this feedback. We will have, you can read there that we will have presented it and got approval and these things, and final approval in June. That would be nice to hit that target, because it's before the next school year. But we won't quit. And if we need to go contingency on it, then we will. And we think July and August, if we just need that little extra time. So you can see, we want to discuss that we don't believe that we can just overnight create a merger process. It has to go through something, and we believe that this type of timeline is one that we can just kind of visualize and work towards. Next steps and priorities. We need to refresh some pictures, board pictures and staff pictures. There's Marie in some different pictures, and then in high school I was a part of the student government, and I was presenting a wild idea back then as well, you can see. So, but we're going to bring in professional photographer to take our picture at the next board meeting or around that next board meeting. We'll have more information for you. we'll just get standard pose and refreshed and things like that. But we felt that would be a good way to represent. And then along with that, kind of standard bios, education, experience, and why you're doing this, right? If we can get those three things from everybody in a certain number of words and it's just kind of uniform, I think the public will be a lot more able to see who we are. And so that's a next step for us. Staff continues to work on their SMART goals, breaking it down into 90-day goals. And then we have to onboard Amy, as we talked about earlier. I'd like to turn the next part over to Marie. Marie, one of her goals over the next couple of years, and we talk about it, is really in continuing to increase professional development, especially as it relates to innovation, and not just for charter schools, but for all public schools, including public charter schools. And so that's one of the things that I'm excited that she's going to share on, because last Friday, she was crisscrossing the state, going to different professional development and being part of it. So, and then we've continued our tour of schools, and I think you have a few highlights on that too. So if you could round this executive director report out today, Marie, that'd be great.
Thank you, Executive Director Kramer. So first we wanted to highlight, as he mentioned, we haven't been to quite as many schools with legislative sessions starting, but we still were able to get to a couple this last month. The two we wanted to highlight were Bridge Elementary and Roots Charter School. You can see there with Bridge, we've got a bunch of students and some apples they're eating. One of the initiatives that Bridge really undertakes is introducing students to a lot of different fruits and vegetables, and really making sure that their students understand a healthy lifestyle. And we just thought that was a fun picture that shows some of the excited faces and maybe some not so excited faces, but as they're trying a different flavor of apple. Roots, then, this was a fun one. This was actually up at the Capitol. You can see Director Tyler Bastian there and one of his students, Jeremiah. And we were actually able to sit down when we visited at Roots Charter School with Director Bastian and Jeremiah, as well as one other student. And those two students actually led the entire visit. And they got to tell us all about their school. They took us on the tour. They answered any questions that we had. And they were so impressive, so articulate and well-spoken. This picture at the Capitol was a really special moment for them. Director Bastian was able to open the session that day with an opening prayer, and then Jeremiah was able to lead the Pledge of Allegiance that day. And he spoke about what an honor that was. And my favorite part was when he said it really helped him realize how special he was and how unique he was, and what a great opportunity that was for him, and really inspiring for us to be able to sit down with those students. And then, as Director Kramer mentioned, I was able last Friday to attend a really wonderful administrator conference. And this was actually something we were able to do with some of our carry forward funds. We had talked about putting forward some different trainings, and two of those things that we've already accomplished with those carry forward funds were this administrator conference and a multi-day crucial conversations workshop. We have one other conference that we will be putting on with those carry forward funds as well. But these two, the UAPCS was able to take the lead on. The administrator conference, I think, was a really wonderful, unique opportunity that I personally haven't seen before. And rather than focusing on data collection or ways that administrators can just help their teachers or help their school, it really focused on administrator mental health and administrator well-being. And it was a really wonderful day coming together. We were in St. George and hoping for sunny weather in February. That was the goal. The weather didn't quite cooperate with us, so it was a drizzly, rainy weekend. But we had almost 100 administrators from across the state join us in St. George. And we had 3 different keynotes throughout the day. We had little breakout sessions, and we're just able to talk about well-being and checking in with each other. You can see from the last slide there, we had our final keynote. He actually is an adventure guide up in Alaska and really talking about what it takes to thrive in your life. And it was an inspiring time. One of the things that really impressed me with this, and we wanted to make sure that the board got to hear about this, as it was your carry forward funds that helped put this conference together, was that afterwards on Monday, which I was glad they waited till Monday, mental health, take that time. But on Monday, we received 5 or 6 personal emails from administrators that attended, thanking you and us for putting together this conference. And not just a quick thank you, but paragraphs sharing how much it meant to them and what they were able to take away from it, and just how needed and how valuable this was for them. So we're hoping this is something we can continue to do in the future, and I think it was a very well spent use of our carry forward funds.
That's it. Unless there's questions.
Thank you. A good report from both of you. Thank you so much. I will echo what they said about the day on the Hill, which was a great day. Wonderful students. The tables that they had set up, inspiring. If you went to each of those tables to learn about the schools, the kids were remarkable, the educators who were there. And it's not, that Capitol Rotunda is not a place for quiet conversation, as you know, because the marble, it just echoes. But it could have been chaos. It was enthusiastic, but it was not chaotic. And kids were great. So as a result, they just really represented us so well. And if any of you ever want a tour of the Capitol building, Directors Kramer and Stephenson led people on tours that day. So they know the Capitol building. And if you ever decide you want to go on a tour, they are able to do that. I also appreciated the notion about our planning, that they're carefully planning, deciding, looking forward, things that we need to do and putting in place so we're not caught months from now not having had things in place. I appreciate the notion, again, it's always been our philosophy that we don't just, because we have money, just spend it willy-nilly, that we are careful in our planning, that we plan to spend, and the money is important. But sometimes it looks like we have a surplus or a lot of money. We don't, because we have a really good plan in place, and we don't need it today, but we do need it in a planned sequence. And so that's really important to note, that it is carefully planned. And we look forward to meeting Amy in another meeting, and so we'll look forward to having her join us. Very impressive. Wow, very impressive. It's great and speaks well, I think, of the charter school office, these folks, that someone of that stature wants to work with them. And so thank you. And with our schools, and come to the state to, already in the state, but come to this position in the state to do that work. So thank you so much. All right. We are even just a touch ahead for our next item, but I think everyone is here for that time. And oh, no, we're not quite. We're going to be right on time. We have consent calendar, which I frequently skip. I don't know why, because it's an important step. So we have consent calendar. Any motions relative to that? Member Smith, I'm seeing you pull your microphone down.
I'd like to move that we adopt the consent calendar.
A motion to accept the consent calendar. A second to that motion.
I'll second that
And
motion.
a second from Member Bassett. Any discussion relative to that motion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approving this motion, which is to approve the consent calendar, say aye. Aye. And any opposed? Obviously, I think I heard unanimous vote, and that's what it is. Now we can move on to our next item. Thank you for that step. Our next item is a discussion, an action item relative to an amendment request, and Ms. Stevenson will give us a short overview and help us to kind of understand that.
Thank you, Chair. The Freedom Preparatory Academy Board and leadership is here. I don't know if you would like to invite them up now or afterwards.
You're welcome to move forward and come and sit on these end chairs with us, if you will. Thank you so much. And I suspect we have some online as well with us. Yeah,
And I
thanks.
think they might be with Elevated.
Oh, okay. Then we're good.
Unless maybe we've got. Okay, you do have a few. Perfect. We do have some Elevated folks online as well. So perfect. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and do a quick introduction, and then we can have them go as well. Today we have Freedom Preparatory Academy here, and both of the requests that we're going to hear from schools today are a little bit unique. And as staff, when we discussed and went back and forth on these, we weren't quite sure where to classify these requests. And so we want to kind of outline for the board kind of what they're asking for and why these are kind of these tricky requests. And then we've got both schools here today and give you that time to be able to discuss with the schools and then take action as the board sees fit for that. So this specific school, Freedom Preparatory Academy, there's some important background to note here. And this is just a generic paragraph that came from our forms that we had from the ability that schools had during the COVID pandemic, where you as a board gave all charter schools the ability to operate a online program outside of their charter agreement. And in that form, it outlined for the schools that at the end of school year 22, if a school met all of their requirements that were outlined in those forms, they could automatically have that online program added into their charter. It'd be an automatic amendment. And if they didn't meet all of those requirements, that amendment request would not be granted, and the school would have to discontinue that distance program beginning with school year 23. And so that's kind of some background leading into this. Freedom Preparatory Academy was not able to meet all of those requirements, and so that automatic amendment was not granted for this school. And so their realities, the program was discontinued as was directed. They followed all of those guidelines that the State Charter School Board set forth. And they worked hard with their families and their leadership and their board to make sure that a smooth transition happened. And they even began that at the end of that school year 22 so that their families knew this was happening and that they were able to smoothly transition them back into in-person learning rather than continuing that online program. As they transitioned families back, they noted that there was still a continued community interest and that families said, if there's ever a way that we could do online again, we're very interested in that happening. And so since that time, their governing board was able to consider some things. They noted that they did have the infrastructure, they have the staff, they have resources that they can allocate to online programs. And they also noted that since that time, they've been able to establish relationships with UVU and with MTech, and that they have high school students that sometimes additional flexibility is really nice for, with concurrent options and distance options being available with those partnerships, that perhaps bringing an online program back to the school would give that flexibility that would really benefit their high school students. Looking at their performance and growth over the last few years, they have a number of campuses. They have their Provo K-8, their Provo High School, their Vineyard campus, and then their Washington campus, which opened in school year 22, hence the two black spots there. Their performance is the first three squares. So performance has been typical across the board and then commendable at Washington for their 2 years that it has been in operation. And then growth is the last three columns. Growth each year has been either commendable or exemplary. So they're taking students and really helping them grow and move along in their academics. So some considerations, and part of what was the challenge that had disqualified them in that automatic amendment was that while they had their campuses in Provo and in Vineyard and in St. George, there were families that were participating with the school that were not specific to those areas. And it became a challenge in figuring out what responsibility does a school have in making sure students are within that area? If a family reaches out and asks, hey, we're moving, can we still continue to come to this school? What needs to happen there? So those considerations: can online learning be tied to a physical location? Is online learning considered a satellite of a physical location if there are no additional seats, grades, or physical buildings being added? Could online learning without seats, grades, or a physical building be a simple amendment that provides options that help support the school's mission and vision? And so ultimately that question that as staff we've grappled with is this bottom one. Is this application classified as an amendment or a satellite request? They did fill out the satellite documentation, and so that you had all of that information to look through. And then that brings up those two further questions. If this is a satellite request, should they be directed to the satellite application timeline? And that would put this request being reconsidered then in January 25 with a possible begin date of August 26. Or if this is an amendment, do they need to restrict their online enrollment to Alpine and Washington County School District areas, which then leads back to some of those early questions. How do we make sure that a school is tied to a physical location with online access? And that presentation, unless there are questions from the board.
Board members, do you have questions, some clarification? Yeah, please.
Okay, so I actually have a lot of concern on this. So I need a little more. The school wrote compliance concerns related to geographical boundaries. I'm having a lot of heartburn with that because one of the founding principles of a charter school is no geographical boundaries. We have said for years, if a student wants to drive from St. George to Alpine, what do I care? The whole point of a district is a geographical boundary has legal requirements for every child in that boundary. As a charter school, a parent is choosing to leave their geographical boundaries. So if they want to commute, what do I care? So the foundational argument of this is somehow because a student attended Freedom Preparatory Academy, there is no geographical boundary from the founding issue. So the fact that we would impose a restriction on a school that doesn't, by foundational argument, even apply in the first context, disrupt our families, pull them out of an existing program that we granted and said you can have, and now making them come back and go through an entire application process that, without all the context, seems ridiculous to me. That's where I need some context, because I feel like at this point, we were in error saying that there was a compliance issue. So help me understand the origin of the compliance issue, because if it's related to geographical boundaries, there's no compliance issue, unless I'm completely in left field about what the real problem was.
Under previous leadership, when schools were granted the ability to have students online during the pandemic, they could only have online students within their school district that they were authorized for.
Did that come from just a staff leadership opinion, or did our board vote that that should be? Because there's no rule or statute that would support that decision. So I'm having a hard time understanding where that caveat came from when the request was made.
I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look at the form that staff sent out at
Yeah.
that point.
We maybe had been aware of it as a board, but I'm not sure we made an official vote. I'm going to even extend your argument a little bit by saying, because you said a district as opposed to a charter LEA, a district LEA has some geographic connection, which is true. They must accept anyone who lives within that geographic area. However, because Utah equalizes funding in the state, the same thing could happen to a district school as a charter LEA. I'm saying it's the Utah philosophy that kids should be able to come from wherever they live to a specific school. So it doesn't mean they have to live in that geographic area, whether it's a district LEA or a charter LEA. So I'll even extend that to say even more foundational, it's Utah's funding philosophy because we equalize funding. So
May I add a second comment as well? I believe that some of the rationale there under previous leadership was the fact of the, like in a charter, when it says, they're located within Alpine School District, which is material to their authorization. And I think that was where, when the remediation team was discontinuing online programs, that is where I believe that concern had come up for this school, and saying that there were students living outside of either Alpine or Washington School District that were participating in the online program. And they felt like that was a material violation because of that piece that's within their charter. But then I think that's where then those initial questions come from is, can online learning be tied to a physical location? And does a school have that responsibility to go figure out where are you accessing online school from for each student?
I'm seeing some additional questions from the board. May I go to Member Smith and then Vice Chair Phillips?
I just want to say that it's possible that previous board leadership was incorrect, if that's where that direction came from. And I agree with Member Cisneros in the strongest possible terms that, and Chair Bowles, that our vision is to empower students statewide, and without regard for where they're physically accessing their content from, or their provider from.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Phillips.
Thanks so much, Chair Bowles. I would suggest that I'm in agreement with Member Cisneros and Smith about, and Chair Bowles, with regard to the open enrollment that we have in our state, and with the explicit direction that we've been given by legislators and in the charter section for boundary-less schools in charters. And the one thing that where we do have to care about a step is, and it's very simple, so it should not create a barrier. Because it doesn't matter even if districts statewide disagree, would simply be a proper notification. That is, in fact, a rule that we have to follow. That is to say, if a charter school wants to potentially serve students all over the state, then districts all over the state need to be notified. But that can be done very readily. And so my own opinion is that that the actual specific, I think, appropriate sort of thresholds that we set for people to continue with for schools to continue with an online program are, is it successful? Is it something that is in demand by the community? And this school has met all those. And so to me, it would just seem like the next step would have been a proper notification of districts in the state if, in fact, the school was going to open up an online program statewide for its students, many of whom may, in fact, be closer to the locations where they were once served in person, but don't necessarily have to be in order for this to be a request or for the school to provide education. So I think with that proper notification accomplished, the school should have been then granted in the past a continuation of their online program.
May I ask another question too, because it will help in deciding your second question about should it be a satellite or just an amendment to their agreement. Is the request from the school to increase enrollment, or is it to work within the enrollment of our agreement, but they want to serve kids in this other
Yes.
matter?
They're not requesting to add seats. They feel like they've got enough of their max enrollment. It is just the ability to add the online program back to their offerings for their students.
Increasing enrollment, of course, brings funding issues, other kinds of things
Right.
over which we sometimes don't have control on relative to the timelines. But just to work within our current agreement without increasing numbers, to me, I'm just going to give an opinion, and we haven't voted yet. From my perspective, I would vote in the way to say that is just an amendment to their agreement, not a satellite. So, yeah.
Is it technically possible to, instead of doing either of these options, instead we just rescind the removal and keep the previous agreement in force? Because in my lone opinion, the removal should have never occurred in the first place and the continuation should have been granted. So are we able to just rescind that removal with an apology to Freedom Preparatory families for their education being disrupted for an entire school year?
I think we can do whatever the board votes, and yes, we would. We would support whatever the board asks staff to do, and that would make sense.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Sorry, Chair, a follow-up. Executive Director Kramer just made a statement that it would extend to others. So do we have several schools who fell into this same bucket that were affected?
We would need to look at that, but I would bet that there are more than one that would fall into this category.
And the complicating factor is our allowance during the pandemic, right?
Right.
Was it because we were saying you can't serve kids in the same way you were, just like every school in
Right.
the nation, really, that we all had to adjust our delivery systems because of kids. During the pandemic, we had kids who had to be in isolation, so online delivery worked well. So it's just coming back off of that. Not necessarily maybe will schools want to have an online delivery, but could we allow it if they chose to, right? There's the mitigating piece. Member Smith, I saw you had another one, and again, then Vice Chair Phillips.
I just wanted to say, if we are able to simply rescind the previous judgment's not exactly the right word, the restriction against freedom, I would be very much in support of that, because it is the cleanest and simplest way to do this and acknowledge our own mistake. And I think it should not be simply for Freedom Prep, but it should extend to any school that has experienced a similar sort of misinterpretation of the rule.
Vice Chair.
I would just suggest just a couple of caveats to that, although I'm in agreement, Member Smith, and that would be that in Freedom's case, the only reason that they weren't granted was because of this geographical boundary issue. And in the case of other schools, we would have to see, maybe they would not have met the threshold of having a successful program or being able to do all of that correctly. And then the other thing would be, I think that it would still be in the interest of both our board and the school to make that notification, again, which is very simple.
Yeah.
Because it's not a barrier, it's just an action, so that our decision today, like I can tell the way the winds are blowing, our decision today will not in any way be questioned by USBE rule, but by reference to USBE rule in that regard. So I would just want to make sure that, should this decision have been made some time ago, we would have said, it looks like you've run a successful program, and it looks like you're serving students from a wide variety of geographical locations. Let's go ahead and approve that contingent on notifying districts in the state. per board rule. So I would just simply say that we would want to definitely have people come back and ask for this so that we could see why they may not have been granted it. In this case, we consider this, I think, an erroneous or somewhat flimsy reason, but in other cases we may not.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I hope this means too that we're considering this because it may be a more than one or two students in the school. It's going to be a piece of the population. But I hope all schools, all of our schools, feel the flexibility at any time to offer to single students an online experience. If I have a student in my school who's going through a bone marrow transplant, they cannot be in the school because of the immunities that they need, that they have immune deficiencies during that time. And so I would hope that I would serve that child by providing online potentially instruction, or a child who's school phobic, I might provide an online instruction. I will just want to make sure that all of our schools know that delivery should be flexible for them as they need onesies, twosies here and there, right? Or for limited pieces of time. So what we're talking about is extended school year, the full year, not just during a time when someone is recovering from an illness or something. And it's more than just one or two here or there because of a specific need. We're actually establishing a program which others could we draw that distinction. It's not one we're changing the delivery because somebody needs it for the time, but we're allowing a delivery for others to opt into if they choose. That's kind of the distinction I hope that we're drawing. Yeah.
I just wanted to say I agree 100% with what you're saying, that offering our schools the maximum flexibility to serve the students who want to participate with them is very much in keeping with the foundation of charter schools, as Member Cisneros has pointed out. And then to speak to Vice Chair Phillips' concern, I'd like to say I agree with you that we can't simply offer a blanket authorization, but we can offer a blanket rescinding of this decision in these particular cases. If you are a school that was terminated only because of geographic concerns, your distance program is terminated, then this applies, and with no other complicating factors.
If they elect to do
Correct.
that.
Correct.
Yeah. Member Cisneros.
I would like to make a motion, if I may.
We're ready.
I do want to make a quick statement to your point, Chair, of one of the things that I have found somewhat disappointing of coming out of the pandemic, and I realize that's a very odd statement, is that all during the pandemic we said, look at all the things we're learning. And then we've all been trying to put the horse back in the barn. And it's like, why are we doing that? So we had this maximum flexibility. We learned so many things. We learned all these bureaucratic rules and regulations that probably don't need to exist because no real harm was done by rescinding them for 2 years. So why not keep them going, right? So I find this whole thing just so, I feel like I'm wearing a wool turtleneck right now just listening to this argument. And so I really want to say, what did we learn, and can we please move forward with the things that we learned? And I love that this board and the staff are open to working with schools, that schools are constantly reporting that they feel so supported. And so just thank you so much, staff. And thank you for the temperature that is what is moving forward. I feel like we're going back to our Member Smith and back to our origins of maximum flexibility and innovation. So thank you for that. And then I just, again, with the families. So my motion would actually be that we rescind the rescinding of Freedom Preparatory Academy's online program, allowing them to continue with the agreement that was in place prior, with the understanding that they will do a statewide notification in accordance with board rule. That's my motion.
I'd like to second that motion.
All right. Motion from Member Cisneros, second from Vice Chair Phillips, and I see others would have seconded as well. Member Smith, do you want to
I
comment
do have
on
some
that?
discussion to the motion. The motion does not address other schools that are in a similar circumstance. Is that because you want them to come to us one at a time if they exist, or would you like to include a similar rescission for schools that meet the same circumstances?
My thinking on not including it was simplification, which I'm struggling with. I'm working on that. Also, if I'm open to a friendly amendment if you choose to do that, but also I think to give staff a chance to review those individually and see what applies and what doesn't. Because if it's other things, I want to leave that open for staff.
It may be in your motion, if you could, if you consider restating that, could include that the staff could review, and without having come back to the board, if they meet similar situation, that they could offer that without us having to reconsider each school separately. If they meet these same criteria, it could be open to them as well. Would that?
So in this, if we agree that that's how we would like to do things, and I think that it's very wise to make this a more streamlined process for any schools it may apply to, should we vote down the first
Because we have
first motion, vote down the first motion and then make a substitute motion?
all right, Vice Chair Phillips, let's see.
I have a suggestion that because the school has come forward with their leadership with us today, that we consider them and then that we consider a second motion that would actually
There you go.
deal with that, and we can kind of give that some nuance.
There you go. All right. So the motion on the table, unless I hear additional discussion, is to rescind the rescinding or to rescind the restriction for continuing online for Freedom Preparatory Academy. We are going to our motion is to allow them to, within their agreement and numbers, to continue then with an online program should they choose to do so, with the request that they send notification across the state if that's what they choose to do. Have I left out anything? And I kind of restated in a clumsy way. Member Cisneros was better, and we can pull that out of the recording and make it better in our minutes. So, and that was seconded by Vice Chair Phillips. And I'm not seeing additional discussion. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right. That passes unanimously. And so thank you for sitting there. We didn't have questions for you, but we wish you the best. And thank you for taking good care of kids. And we know that some of your students need an online program.
Thank you so much.
Without belating the matter anymore, I just wanted to, we talked about the power of love, and I just want to send a big shout of love to Marie. She has been massively helpful as we've tried to navigate this kind of complicated thing. So I just want to make sure publicly we said thank you to her for her help with this. So
Thank you. We feel similarly. So from both sides, she gets
And
that.
can I
So
introduce our
thank
new director? As you know, Lynn Herring retired. Lynn Herring retired December 31st, a rock star in the charter community here in Utah for almost 21 years. And Grayson Wolf graciously took on those big shoes. And so she's been with us a long time also. Started out as a teacher, now she's our executive director. So Grayson Wolf, the board.
Grayson, we're so happy to have you join with us. Thank you so much. And I think you'll be fine filling those shoes. Yeah. If you need shoe help, you have to see Michelle's shoes because.
I saw them under the table.
I know, she's magnificent, right? So there you go. Thank you for coming today, and in case we had good questions, so thank you so much from that. All right, let's move to the next item.
Do we want to have another
second
motion?
Yes, of course. Thank you for keeping me on task.
I don't think I can pull it all together as well as Rebecca if she wants to do it.
Or Cindy.
Or, yeah.
Okay. I would like to move that the State Charter School Board staff review rescindings of the online offerings of charter schools who requested from the State Charter School Board a continuation of those programs in those cases where those programs were rescinded simply based on geographical boundary concerns, and bring back to the board a report that may inform our decision-making.
Okay. All right. Motion and a second to that motion.
I will second that.
All right. Member Bassett, second. So a motion from Member Phillips for the staff to review what other schools might be you'll fit the same criteria and bring that back as a report, maybe in the next meeting, a March meeting, that can go on our agenda, and a second from Member Bassett. Any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously again. So thank you for doing that little bit of research and bringing back a report in our March meeting. All right, now we are ready to have a discussion about Elevated Charter School pre-operational amendment. Ms. Stephenson again will lead us through that discussion. Thank you, or preview it.
Thank you, Chair. So this is another one that is a little bit of a unique situation, but again, we'll walk through it and give the context there. And then Director Amy Edwards is joining us online from Elevated Charter School. So the background here is that Elevated Charter School was approved in January 2023, and they are set to begin operation in August of 2024. So yes, that means they are pre-operational right now. In their charter application and their current agreement that has been signed, it outlines the following. They plan to enroll grades K through 6 in this 2024-2025 school year. For the coming then 25-26 school year, that's when they would add in grades 7 and 8. And then the year after that, the 26-27 school year, that's when they would add in grades 9 through 12 and then be a full K-12 LEA. They noted in their application that this requested gradual schedule was to make sure that they were ensuring quality instruction to all of their students. Today's request, they stated that they've received requests from over 30 families to enroll students in grades 7 and 8 for the 24-25 school year. So you can see this little graphic that we put here. It shows the current school year that they had authorized, which was the K-6, and it breaks down to 300 students across the K-6 grade levels. And what they're proposing in today's request would be moving up K through 8 and an additional 60 seats, moving that max enrollment to 360 students. The request does go a little bit further, though. The written part at the top here is what's in their charter agreement, and that what they are proposing actually ends up changing the first 4 years. And so year 1, you can see the max enrollment is 300. What they're proposing moves it up to 360. Year 2, they were authorized for the 450. It would now move to 490. Year 3, it was 650. They're now requesting the 700. Year 4 was 750, and the request would now move that up to the 900, so they would hit that max enrollment 1 year sooner than what was in their application and what's in their charter agreement. You can see that the grade spans also change. So year 1 is K-6. Now that would be K-8 if approved with the request they brought today. Year 2 was K-8. Next year would be K-9 with the request they brought today. Year 3 is when they would hit K-12. That still remains the same with what they are requesting. So the main changes with those max enrollment totals, and then a little bit of adjustment in when they add the different grade levels moving up into high school. So the considerations that we wanted to bring to the board today would be the following. Should a charter school that has not yet opened and operated be allowed to pursue a contractual amendment, or should they be held to the initial terms they applied for and agreed to? And then, given that a school is not yet operational, should the proposed change be classified as an amendment, or does it qualify as an expansion because of the addition of grade levels and seats? And so depending on how we classify that, that brings up then those following questions. If it's an expansion request, then does Elevated Charter School need to be directed to the large expansion application timeline? And it would qualify as a large expansion since it is the addition of more than one grade level. And that would be the request being reconsidered in January 25 to begin in August 26, which essentially makes it a moot point because those grade levels and seats would already be added per the timeline that they applied for. Or if this is an amendment, while they are pre-operational, would multiple years be considered, or would we only be looking at the 24-25 school year request? That completes my presentation, unless you have questions.
All right. Thank you so much. And thanks for joining us online. Stand by. We'll see what questions we might have from the board first, or the questions that you have. Member Smith?
I don't particularly have questions about this. Just I'd like to express frustration that many of both of these considerations before us today revolve around the concept of flexibility, and it makes me crazy that we would even consider becoming more restrictive. So that's my general outlook. So I would say, given that, one, should a charter school that's not yet open and operated be allowed to pursue a contractual amendment, we would be stupid not to allow them to take something that they've learned during that pre-operational phase and apply it in a way that will improve their school. So of course we should let them pursue an amendment. It boggles my mind that we would be like, well, you've discovered this isn't going to work, but we're going to hold you to it. That's ridiculous. And then second, given that the school is not yet operational, should proposed change be classified as an amendment as a qualifies an expansion request? I would suggest that it's really actually neither, because the ultimate number of students involved remains the same. They're simply changing how they're going to hit enrollment. Okay, there you go. That's my thoughts.
Thank you for that. Member Cisneros? Yeah.
So has the Common Data Committee already given numbers and funding based? I know the rule says that the superintendent will give max allocation. So their max allocation would be accounted for already in this year, but only in the K-6 grade band, which is at a much lower funding stream than 7 and 8 by almost a full percentage point. So, I mean, or jumping from 90 to 99% of the WPU, right? So actually almost a full 10% is what my brain was trying to say. So that's a significant amount of money, even if the actual student body count doesn't. So my question revolves more around, what have we committed to school finance already for this pre-operational year? Not us being flexible, but the realities of budgets is where my concern comes.
Yeah, that's our concern sometimes. Changing the numbers, knowing that families, I suspect that this is because they know that now families are saying, gosh, we're bringing family. We have 7th and 8th graders. We'd like them to get started sooner instead of having to wait. The question is good relative to funding, and do we have our funds available? It would mean an additional, if they were at max, an additional 60 students more than was initially planned for, potentially, right? An additional 60 in that first year, an additional 40 in the second year, an additional 20 in the third year, and then that fourth year it would meet the max, total max, right? So that's a good question. Ms. Stephenson, do you?
Yeah, so the numbers and grade levels have already been reported to the Common Data Committee. That occurred not this last October, but the October prior. So they work, a few years ahead of schedule.
Can
I address?
Yeah,
Oh,
we'll come back to you.
I have a
Hang
follow-up
on.
question that's related to that. We just recently approved in January some expansions and some satellites. If we were to, I love the idea of flexibility. I also understand we live in a world where we plan for funding, and we often look at that by necessity in a certain window and according to a certain calendar. If we consider this as a small expansion, essentially, I think it would not fall under that, because are they asking for more than 50 students?
60.
Yeah.
60 and the additional more than one grade
grades,
level.
So is it possible, because our small expansions would have been, or our large expansions and satellites would have just been notified, but they don't start until the following year, right? So we are kind of past a deadline, aren't we, for being able to provide notice to various groups who fund for this, because otherwise, it seems to me that we could allow certain types of amendments, depending on when they come, what kinds we can allow at certain points in the season of amending. We can also, particularly if maybe this had come in the fall as a small expansion, 1 grade and maybe under 50 students, we could have easily done it for the coming fall. So there are all kinds of things we could do within certain parameters, but we might be outside of those parameters at this time. But I'm open to thoughts and suggestions. So
I know Miss
I-
Edwards also wanted to make a comment as well. May she do that first, Member Smith, before? Thank you. Go ahead, Miss Edwards, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have been working really closely with Academic West on our budget, and I apologize that this request is coming at this point. We wanted to have hard numbers. We now know exactly what our curriculum is and is going to cost. We now know exactly how many teachers we need, and we did a very in-depth budget to make sure that this would work. But one of the things that we also covered is that we have a surplus from our pre-operational funds. So if we needed that, we could use that to cover the expenses. And we would also be willing to stick to the original 300 if we could offer grades 7 and 8. That does still work. We still do have enough 300.
It I think is, even if you have it in your budget, this doesn't sometimes feels like it makes sense, but it's because of where students are going to be, so that statewide as they plan where will students be and how do we match dollars, it's the enrollment that really is concerning sometimes relative to WPU that follows students and other funding pieces. Member Smith, you want to add?
As I think this through, it seems to me that we should not be so concerned about how the finances are going to impact this particular school in a particular circumstance, as we are whether this is the best thing for the school. And if this is the best thing for the school, we can certainly make them aware that these are the financial consequences probably if we make this. And because of the timing of the request, it would be, you may run into these potential problems, and so that may influence whether you choose to continue with this course of action or not. But we should let the school make that determination, not us.
For us to make a determination with how many grades elevated charter could open with how many grades, I think is more, we have that flexibility. It's the funding piece of it where students will be. For example, if you could still stay in that first year, remember it's going to be moot by the second year, because then we can go through a process, and then it's only in this first year that this becomes problematic for us because of the timing of it. But if you could stay still within the capped numbers of students allowed in that first year, even in adding grade levels, there's another potential option that could be considered. Member Cisneros, you want to add?
I think I've made it really clear that I'm on the side of schools. However, I'm on the side of schools following rule and statute. And if we don't like the rule and statute, then we need to do like our staff has done, which is help get rules and statutes become more flexible. But as it stands right now, rule and statute are really clear on timelines because of the way that the budgets flow all the way up into the legislative committees and then back down on legislative estimates. And the legislative estimate has already been written for the school as a K through 6. My concern is not the school's financial viability. Mine is the agreements that we make as an authorizer to USBE and then us honoring that rule and statute as it is. We're outside of the timeline. We've already made funding commitments based upon projections that we brought to them, and they are going to operate in good faith in funding that school at its full operational level. For us to come back and say, well, we guessed wrong. As much as I want schools to learn right, we guessed wrong. So you need to give us an exemption to your rule. I don't think as an authorizer, that's acting in good faith with the state board. So whether or not we have 60 families that want 7 and 8, then we need to get that rule changed. But there's so many more pieces at play outside of this school, outside of this board, that those numbers go up. And they sit around, Marie can attest to this, for hours negotiating those numbers. Districts negotiate those numbers. The Common Data Committee gets together for hours and negotiates those numbers so that the fiscal analysts at the state can make good projections. The process is insane. They bring demographers in to try to look at transient behaviors throughout the state. So for us to go back and say, thanks, you did all this work and we're just going to say no to it because we want to be flexible, I don't think that's operating in good faith as an authorizer.
Chair Bowles.
Yes, please.
Sorry.
That was fun.
Whoops.
In the executive director's report, we just mentioned staff updates, and in the staff updates talked about the support team and that they really have been working diligently through some of these trickier issues, which is wanting to provide flexibility and wanting to be a supportive authorizer, but yet also recognizing that there are policy, rules, timelines, a lot of complexities to the work that we do. And so we always pride ourselves in trying to be really efficient and really effective as staff. But I think, do we put a lot of effort into creating and maintaining positive relationships? That's kind of back to that parent analogy. I would say, yes, we all are saying how much we care. Is there the possibility that there are rules in place, though, and that we just need to explain those rules? And it does create order, and it does create, I know, even Assistant Attorney General has weighed in and said, what kind of precedent are we setting if we do some of these things? And it could become more complicated. Not that that should be the primary driver of this decision. Other members have mentioned the primary driver is our students, right, and their well-being. So I just wanted to go backwards just a little bit to that staff update and just remind you what we were trying to do in that story was just trying to characterize the very difficult line and why we have this at the board's attention. We thought, we need to create precedent. We need to think about our rules. We need to think about our relationships. A lot of things go into it. So I just want to thank you for giving me a chance to just kind of revisit that.
Thank you, and we appreciate that insight as well, reminder. May I ask a question? Because I'm rethinking kind of what my last comment was based on what Member Cisneros just said. Those of you who know charter funding a little better than I do, is there a difference in the amount of funding a school receives for a 5th grader, 6th grader, 7th, and 8th?
Yes.
All right. Okay. I'm going to withdraw some of my comment, thinking that if it was even, I knew kindergarten was a little different, maybe, but when it gets up to 7th and 8th, that funding changes. Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Would you like those
Vice
amounts?
Chair Phillips, and then.
So I just wanted to make a comment because I love the open-mindedness of this board in considering what schools need, what students need. I just wanted to remind the board members that we've worked really hard with USBE law and licensing in the last, especially year, and have received an enormous amount of support from them in implementing much more flexible processes for small expansions, large expansions, and satellites. And that was unprecedented, by the way. At least for my time on the board, it was unprecedented that we had this, majority, and in some cases unanimous support from the Law and Licensing Committee to push toward flexibility for our schools. And as many schools who have been through the process already have attested, that process now is very simple, very transparent, clear to us, clear to them. But the one place where both we and they have felt we cannot budge is this timeline, because it puts in, which does go along with the funding calendar, which does provide a kind of notice to us for our startup funds as well as to the state for its full funding, which constitutionally, both federally and by the Utah State Constitution, they are required to fund that WPU. And just to give, without mentioning a school, but just to note that even in the case where you have an on-time satellite request that is in fact approved by us, there have been times when we still, as leadership and staff, have had to go to the legislature, go to the USBE to make sure that school is funded, and it was on time, to make sure that funds are held in escrow, if you will, by the state board in order to fund that large satellite that came into a district where funds had already been dispersed for that district. And so it's not a small thing, and it would have put, particularly this particular district was going from a very small single school LEA to tripling, quadrupling their numbers in their satellite, which again had gone through the exact right timing process, still presented an unprecedented need to manipulate the financial, to ensure that the school was funded by its July 1 allotment and wouldn't default on its bond. I mean, so these are real things that that we've already had to grapple with successfully in that case, but primarily successfully because of timing, because we could lean on the board rule, we could lean on statute there, because there was also statute that supported that funding. So with all the flexibility that we have ourselves shown, and which the USBE committees and then board have shown in these processes, I do think, going back to Member Cisneros' comments, we have to show good faith that that we're doing our part to make sure that the school is in fact in a position to insist on its funding, as this previous LEA was, because timelines had been followed. So I just want to make sure that, you know, we do understand that we are in a flexible environment, but that's the one place where we can't flex too much.
Member Smith.
I think that I agree with Member Cisneros and Vice Chair Phillips that we need to be mindful of the financial considerations, especially and with the timeline in this process. So I think, generally speaking, perhaps something that happens like this at the wrong time in the timeline would be a place where I agree we may not be able to show flexibility. I still maintain that the answer to question one, should they be allowed to pursue contractual amendment, is a yes. We should allow schools to pursue a contractual amendment, but it should have to follow our established timelines.
Well said. Well said. Thanks. Ms. Stephenson, did you have something else you wanted to add?
I was going to say, if you would like to know how those funding changes, I could share that information if you would
Thanks.
like.
Thank you. I think that folks kind of know, and I was reminded of that. So thank you. I think we're okay. Thanks. All right. Are we ready for a motion? Knowing that we want as much flexibility for schools as they can have to do the work that they want to do. That's the nature of, particularly around charter schools, that they should have that. They're trying things. We want them to be nimble and be able to move and try. The funding piece is the difficult piece that doesn't allow us to provide flexibility outside of timelines. And I think we've said that to a person here, that makes it not something we can bend. As much bending as we can do, we will push to the limits, but those would be a bend to break, and so that's tough to do. So that's just a statement. That's not a motion. And I know it feels like if we've got the budget, and we'll be careful with our budget, we can still admit kids. And though if you were a private school, that would make sense. But because we all depend on state funding and still we're connected to a big network, it doesn't work. It's still just the same. All right. Are we ready for a motion?
Can I ask something? If it has to do with, I understand the fidelity and setting a precedent. is it possible for, I just hate to go back. I have all these, parents and teachers
Sure.
even eagerly waiting to hear about this morning. And I hate to tell them no. If we, to compensate for adding those grades, if we stayed at 300 or even changed our max to like 280, 290, so we still have plenty of room in each grade level, would that be something that
See,
would be
and I
considered?
kind of led you that way a little bit, but then as I heard comments, that was the notion about grade levels are funded differently. I had to be reminded of that it's not an even funding for each grade level. When you move into upper grades, the funding changes then. So if we just changed grade levels, it still affects funding amounts. So we kind of have to, in this first year, you have to your family say, we love you, we're so sorry, we have some restrictions that are in place to protect everyone and to protect educational funding for everyone in the state. And so if they can be patient for a year, we're going to get up and be going, and we'll be ready for you in that second year, because we could then step in and help you in the appropriate timeline for your second year of operation. It's this first year that makes it hard. And I'm sorry you have to go back and say that to folks and they'll feel disappointed. Tell them we feel disappointed for you, but we're kind of all have to work within regulations and timelines. Ms. Stephenson.
I had a question that we could bring up. Going back to what they are requesting today. I mean, one of our main pieces is missing that October 1, which is when the Common Data Committee information comes. Would the board want to then, and with that flexibility in their pre-operational agreement, look at for year 2, moving to then that K9 and increasing all those amounts as they have outlined here, and getting that put into their agreement based on today's discussion, rather than having them have to come back for additional expansion requests. And that's something we could take care of. So that could be something that Director Edwards could share with her families.
Didn't know that then she can move forward. We're waiting for a motion. If others of you feel that way who might make a motion, that's how we could go.
I'm bad being the one that like put a monkey in their wrench. So I will make a motion that will be bittersweet. So I'll make a motion to deny the request to add grades 7 and 8 in school year 24-25, but to permit the grades and estimated number of students served by grade as proposed for year 2 ongoing.
All right. So the motion that I heard is to deny the request for this first year. And you know the reason. I won't go through that again. But to approve the changes for the second year ongoing through complete implementation. All right. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll be happy to second that motion.
Second from Member Smith. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote then. All those in favor say aye. Aye. So passes unanimously. We're so sorry that we're bound by those same regulations. Please explain to your families and tell them we wish you the best in that second year, and tell them just to get ready, that you'll be ready for them in the year 25-26. All right? Thank you so much. And thanks for asking. It doesn't hurt to ask. No, we're on your side. We wish we could, and we would do it.
I know.
Thank you.
I know. Thank you.
All right. So that takes us to the end of our business for the morning. Unless we just have that, but we can start if lunch is available, we could start sooner. I don't know if it's ready, and we could return a little bit sooner because I think the rest of our agenda are not time certain for other individuals. It's just our discussion, right? So we could, if lunch is ready, we could begin sooner, and then we could come back for our other discussion items.
If lunch is not ready, I'm ready for lunch.
Okay, if not, we'll go to that. Yeah,
See.
to the legislative discussion. And then we can condense in the afternoon, which no one is going to cry about. And I shouldn't say that because as soon as I do, I start talking, it takes us an extra hour or two.
Let's just go ahead and do
Do you want to go ahead? All right. Vice Chair Phillips, will you take us through the legislative discussion?
Yes, I will. I'm going to go ahead and do the legislative. Oh, lunch is ready?
Oh,
Maybe.
what do you think?
If it's down
Should we adjourn?
Yeah.
Let's adjourn and come back sooner than the 1:45. Let's see how long it takes us to eat, and if we start sooner, we do. And we'll complete our business earlier in the day, which I think everyone would be willing to do, right? All right, we are now adjourned for lunch. Good discussion. For the lunch, Miss Stephenson, I know has worked to make sure we always have a nice lunch to keep us going in the afternoon. She did say, however, she tried to think of a light lunch so that it wouldn't be too heavy so we'd fall asleep, which I think means we have to stay awake and active as we continue this afternoon, which I'm sure to a person we're intending to do. We're re-adjourning at 12:32 on Thursday, February 8th, and we are at a point of our discussion that I'll turn to Vice Chair Phillips to talk about the legislative session, give us some updates.
Thank you, Chair Bowles. It's a pleasure to do that. I especially want to note not only legislation that affects K through 12 educators and students, but also some bills that we have had special influence on as a state charter school board. So I'm going to start with that one, actually. HB 301, which has Representative Lisenby as a sponsor, is already on the House third reading calendar for House bills, and because she is in leadership, it's very likely to pull through. And that particular bill is called Charter School Accountability Amendments. The great thing about this bill is not only does it clean up a bunch of language in that bill, because it's kind of old statute, but it also subtly does several things. One is to kind of adjust or make clearer our relationship to the Utah State Board of Education, which is very helpful to us. The second thing it does is repurpose, to some degree, authorizers on innovation, collaboration within the public education system, and choice, which is right in line with our strategic plan. It also allows for instance, VSIP was in that section. It allows for all kinds of creative mergers or agreements between and among charters that are not just coming about as a function of a charter school potentially being recommended for closure, but rather sees a place for those kinds of agreements related to just improving schools, improving programs, allowing a charter school to be successful in a different way or better way than it has been. In addition, it also does something that charter stakeholders were very interested in, and that is providing more due process when charters have been notified of a deficiency. This bill would require for those charter schools to have an opportunity very early in the process for either for a hearing before a committee of their authorizer or the actual board, their authorizing board. So it also focuses it doesn't take away those minimum academic standards that are required for every public school by the USBE, but it does broaden those things on which we can evaluate a school, including sort of these just education performance standards, and especially those that are in the charter that we have authorized. So what it does is it will, I'm hoping that among many other things, which I've already alluded to, that it will incentivize any of our charter schools who have not done an official Exhibit A or sign an agreement post application, because an application is not an agreement. If you think about it, we often have sort of pretended that it was and just signed an authorizing statement with a school and had its application kind of stand for the agreement. But an application is a very different sort of a thing. And so what I'm hoping, because charters now will know that our main emphasis is on our good relationship, our bilateral relationship with their governing boards, and on fidelity to their charter, that for which we authorized them, that they will, that's a much better position for charters to be in and for us to be in, and that will incentivize them to come to us if they don't have a good agreement that reflects who they are and what they're doing, to come and do that with us. So, and remember, it doesn't just affect us, it also affects all charter or school authorizers. So institutes of higher ed, as well as districts are kind of in a different position, but all authorizers in the state. So we anticipate that to come through, and largely in its current form, which is the second substitute. Many of you are aware that HB 261, called Equal Opportunity Initiatives, sponsored by Representative Hall, has already been signed by the governor. It was signed on January 30th. This impacts public education, including charters, obviously. We're part of that system, very significantly. And it prohibits what it calls discriminatory practices. But essentially, among other things, those discriminatory practices are defined as anything that, even training in K through 12 about inclusion or other sorts of areas that might fall under kind of the DEI bill, bill's definitions, which is what this has been called. So that's something, and my understanding is that now I can't remember, but either it or the bill about the bathrooms, which I'll get to, is effective immediately. If not, they're effective in the next few weeks. HB 29, which is currently in Senate Education, in the Senate Education Committee, it's called Sensitive Material Review Amendments. You'll recall that in previous legislative session, sensitive materials was a bill that was passed and had kind of an objective standard, a bright line standard about what was objectionable material for K through 12 libraries and so on. And it also had a subjective process where challenges could be made, and then a review process would ensue about whether or not certain materials ought to be kept in a school. And each LEA, charter LEAs, district LEAs, had their own processes for those particular reviews that they would follow, and that was their local control. Well, in this particular bill, sponsored by Representative Ken Ivory and Senator Todd Weiler, it makes it so that if a number of districts, 3 school districts or 2 districts and 5 charters remove a book on that standard, then all districts and charters must remove this book. Now, this has been opposed vehemently by all kinds of different people, not just the UEA, but all people who are very strong for local control, realizing that on that standard, there may be a very different lived experience of somebody, say, in urban Salt Lake versus somebody in maybe Blanding. And so where it has been opposed, it has primarily been opposed on the idea that such a small number of districts or parents representing a very small number of students could speak for the rest of the state on that, for all the, these local boards that are elected officials and in charters appointed by their own bylaw processes. And so most of the opposition to that has centered around not allowing the local boards that have been elected and appointed to have some control and say. One particular bill, HB 303, which is called School Curriculum Requirements and Neutrality Bill, kind of has a lot of the same things that that USBE rule does in terms of its neutrality rule, which basically prohibits school officials and employees from endorsing, promoting, or disparaging certain beliefs or viewpoints. Now, at this time, this particular bill has been lifted from the House Education Standing Committee, suggesting that right now it's not going through, but it may still. A positive to, I should go back on the other one too and say a positive to the sensitive materials amendments is that it does limit the number of challenges that can be made by a single individual in a year, which is sort of good because there are these people around who have been taking up enormous amounts of time in some districts by lodging 50 complaints instead of maybe a few very specific ones with more merit, let's say. So with this particular HB 303, some of the opposition I mean, it's a great idea. I think just kind of from the face of it to have, and teachers, I think many teachers, most teachers try to be very neutral in the classroom and not espouse a particular religious or political viewpoint. However, some of the critics, including critics of the bill sponsors party even, in committee have talked about, and in the interim as well, have talked about how this bill seems to be neutral, but instead seems to actually target specific groups. So that, for instance, it might be okay to wear a CTR ring if you're a teacher, but not have a pride sticker on your desk. So this one still has work that they're trying to figure out where lines should be drawn and in what way. It did, however, insert language the last time it was posted concerning allowing for teachers of whatever persuasion, religion, or whatnot to have personal things on their desks, like pictures and other things of their spouses and of their own life that would not be prohibited. We have in HB 257 sex-based designations for privacy, anti-bullying, and women's opportunities from Representative Birkeland and Senator McKay, and that was signed into law on the 30th of January, and that one was effective immediately. And basically, it talks about how a student may only access an operational sex-designated privacy space in a public school that is designated for student use if the student's sex corresponds, and we're talking about the student's sex assigned at birth corresponds with the designation of the privacy space. So if in those cases where a student's gender identity does not match their sex as assigned at birth, then that individual may not use that may not use the bathroom of the gender identity rather than the sex assigned at birth. And what the law suggests is that students then that the school meet with the student's parents and hopefully have a plan where the student is able to use a single stall bathroom or faculty bathroom. And if not, the suggestion has been made that the school would stagger which gender could go into various bathrooms at which times. So that could be one that's difficult, and it kind of threads the needle on federal law. I wouldn't be surprised to see that much as some of our other legislation from last year that touches on some of these subjects being sort of clogged up in the courts for a bit. So a couple of other ones that are big. HB 220 or 221, first sub from Representative Peterson, gives student teachers stipends so that they have kind of a little bit of a living wage while they do their student teaching. I think this will be helpful to some of our teachers. The good news is that in the past handful of years, you've had universities with teacher preparation programs actually allowing teachers at times to be paid while they're doing their student teaching anyway, to continue on, especially if they've been operating under an associate educator license, to continue to teach and be paid. And so the universities themselves have been flexing on this, which I've seen is to be a very good move. You also have for SB 173 by Senator Fillmore, market compensation for teachers. This wouldn't begin until 2027, but it would identify the top 25% of teachers based on a rubric from USU's Center for Schools of the Future. That would then give those particular teachers a significant bonus. And I believe he was quoted in the news, Senator Fillmore was quoted in the news saying, we want potential teachers to know that this profession can be readily be a six-figure profession in terms of salary. So I like the sound of that. I don't know, I'm not familiar with the rubric, and I'm also not familiar with, at this point, this is something that won't be effective until later, and so it would depend on a significant amount of ongoing money, which we have very little of in this particular budget. So I don't know if that, even if that passes, if the fiscal note will be too much for, 3 years in the future. One other one, well, a couple others of interest that really affect K through 12 education. SB 137, also by Senator Fillmore, called Teacher Empowerment, gives teachers statutory power to remove students from classrooms in a similar way that administrators have that power. Now, as a teacher of 40 years, I always felt I had that power. I'm not sure why it would need to be in statute, although it's also something that sends a very poor message to a student. It suggests, unless that student is dangerous to himself or others, or to the teacher, it suggests that you are sort of exonerating your responsibility. And as per Member Cisneros' wonderful thought today, one of the, not just a very kind thing is showing love to your students, but actually it's been shown in several studies, most of them done in the 21st century, or at least the results published in the 21st century, that the student's relationship with that teacher is actually directly correlated with that student's academic achievement. And so the other thing it does, which is kind of in line with a lot of the bills we have going on in our session right now, which is sort of anti-federal government, a theme that's running through many of our proposed, the bills that are before this legislature, is that it essentially creates a fund to support defense of a teacher who determines not to follow a federal directive. However, it does say in the bill that you have to follow federal law, and I've been racking my brains to figure out what federal law, what federal directive is not a federal law. So I'm not sure what the impact of this would be, and also teachers are not just responsible to the legislature, they are also responsible to federal law. I'm thinking in particular special education law, and can, even in this state, lose their license if they do not follow it. So I'm not sure exactly how that bill would be executed in reality, but I do like the idea of teachers being empowered. I think they often empower themselves. HB 269, school history curricula amendments from Representative Michael Peterson. Now, this would have required schools to display a framed copy of the 10 Commandments in the schools. However, not only would that likely be found to be unconstitutional in some sort of judicial context, but also at this point, perhaps recognizing that the powers that be at the legislature have lifted it from a standing committee and it is not being considered. I would say, though, that many of those bills that are lifted, I've noticed over the years, do come back at the very last minute. And so that's maybe one to watch. I don't think that it has garnered much opposition because it seems to be something that we don't do in public schools per se, at least without giving similar space to other sorts of religious directives, I guess you could say. HB 415, school fee amendments. This is from Strong, and right now it's in House Education, and it would eliminate curricular fees altogether, phase them out by a certain date, and it oddly does not provide any sort of legislative support to replace that income and revenue from fees, but would in fact require the LEAs to make that up, to make up that revenue themselves. And I think it's a phase in. I can't remember if it's 2027 or by 2029. I wanted to mention some funding that's really important to us. And that is that it appears that we are looking at somewhere between 3.8% and a 5% increase in the WPU, which may also gain another 1.2%. Because the Public Ed Appropriations Committee has recommended that, and so has the governor. So I'm optimistic that it will be a 5% increase, which is really good, especially when you consider this is a lean year for ongoing money. In addition, I wanted to point out a couple of things. Senator Fillmore has broadened the definition of what educators can do to receive the money for paid professional hours, which is kind of nice for teachers as they're doing all sorts of things to improve themselves, their skills, their pedagogy, their content knowledge. And then also, we have a couple different things going on specific to our board. Many of you are probably aware, but you may not be, that our board, after being called to into the Education Appropriations Committee as the subcommittee, we were scheduled to have maybe as much as 3.5 million removed from our own monies that we have for particularly for startup. But there was also the proposition that maybe as much as $500,000 could be removed from our ongoing operational funds. In response to that, we testified that most of that money was encumbered based on our recent actions over the last year in terms of satellites, expansions, and new schools, as well as the broadening ability of our board to utilize those funds for small expansions. And then also, given the fact that we've had a transition in leadership, there were some of our staff positions that had gone unfilled, which we were already working to fill. So we explained this to the legislature, but we also, in good faith, offered up a certain amount that they might be able to recapture, knowing that the other money would continue to be ongoing, so that we would still be able to fund what we needed to. And so as of today, the Public Education Appropriations Committee has recommended that $1 million be recovered from our carry forward funds and move back into the state's coffers. But that was something that we anticipated and even recommended to be team players, that we could give that much, but no more, because of the nature of the encumbered nature of the rest of our funds. So that it appears that, at least I'm cautiously optimistic, that our recommendation has been taken and acted upon. And then, as a last thought about funding, UCN, UAPCS, USBE leadership, our leadership, have been working very hard with the financial section of the USBE and with legislators to help them understand how important it is that over time, in the near future, I guess I should say for this year, that charter-based funding be held harmless, which required the legislature, because we have a little bundle that's ongoing money, but it required them to once again give about 3.6 million, 3.5 million to make us whole for this coming year. Now, making us whole does not give us in any way parity with small or small-ish districts who, besides all the other appropriate funds they receive, NES and other things, because they are necessarily existent schools, small schools, they receive a very specifically defined line item for administrative funding costs. And it is only to be used for that. I mean, that's what it's for. And it is not for other things. It is not to sort of flesh out their K through 12 programs. It's just for that. So it really is comparing apples to apples. And compared to that, just as a quick example, this would be still 4 or 5 years old, a school of about 560 students, a charter school, would have received $56,000. A district of similar size would have received closer to 250 to 280,000. And it's literally to do the exact same thing. So even now, as we move into this coming year, fiscal 25, it looks like the legislature will hold us harmless, and we'll still get that 5,600 for my example, but we will not get parity. But it also appears that we've had a representative introduce language that would not only require the USBE, who's already been looking at this very closely because they're interested in parity here, to create a formula that would tie those funds to the WPU as they are with districts, and would have kind of a sliding scale, as it were. So the bigger you are, the less you get, because you have more economies of scale. And if you're over a certain amount, you would not get any, just as bigger districts don't get any. But you would have an opportunity to have apples to apples, and it might take a phase-in period of a few years, because to give charters parity on that funding line, which they should have, and the vast majority of legislators are coming to that agreement with us. It would take, if we were to do it this year, $26 million. Now, that's not, when you look at the numbers that the legislature works with, that's not outrageous, but it is outrageous for this year, where when they first started without recouping additional monies, they only had $7 million of ongoing money to spare and to give away. So it will be something that they have to plan for, that they may have to phase in. But I did want not only our charter groups listening, but also stakeholders in this room to know that that this is something that really charter associations, charter stakeholders have been working on for many years, especially Kim Frank. I'm going to give her a shout out from the UCN, who has been working on this very hard and who has gathered the support of other stakeholders and of legislators in particular who are really beginning to understand that there's a true lack of parity here that is hurting charters. So anyway, that's the end of my report. And if there are questions, I'd be happy to take them. If I don't know that I can answer all of them, but certainly we are very grateful for the legislators, especially Representative Lisenby, who has been a champion of cleaning up this charter authorizer bill for us, and is really going to help us, I think, step forward into a very positive MOU with the USBE.
So overall, thank you to Vice Chair Phillips for her tireless work. And this is not something that just happens during the session. When she refers to the bill that Representative Lisenby is sponsoring for us, it was Vice Chair Phillips' work for months prior to that has enabled that to come to the place where it is today. And we appreciate that work for her report today and for her continuing ongoing work on our behalf and on behalf of the charter schools in the state of Utah. Do any of you have questions or other things you wanted to ask about this session? Things that you've heard or wanted to discuss, follow up on, even if you had to do some research for you? Okay. No, not seeing any. Then thank you. And it'll be interesting to have a report in March, in the March meeting, because we're back to our regular week in March, and so that may be possible then at that time. All right, let's move to our next item, which is a discussion and action item around small expansion process. Ms. Stephenson, again today, help us with that, please.
Do we have the startup and implementation grant first?
Oh, thank you so much. Yep, I just jumped right ahead, which I do periodically, so watch me. Thank you. Startup and implementation grant, Dr. Kramer instead. Thanks.
Great. And if it's okay with the finance subcommittee that I report back on what we worked on today? Okay, great. Just wait for that. If you could put, it's called Startup Grant Updated February. It's a PowerPoint. And Excel, and then from there a Word. We're going to use PowerPoint, Excel, and Word.
Good.
So, just want to recognize that at the last meeting, presented on some context and some history with the startup and implementation grant. And at that time, we moved it into finance committee work. And so that's a good use of this board's time and expertise. And so we did have a meeting before the meeting today. And I just helped facilitate some questions that we've already been talking about, and gathered some input and made some adjustments and those things. I don't think that we have an action item today. I think it's more of an update because we did have enough input that we still have some more work to do. And so I just want to kind of upfront state that. But nonetheless, if we could provide the update today, then it'll be less that we are doing in March when we get back together. And so you can go through many of the first slides, Marie, and get to the one this is all the original PowerPoint that presented our state of the startup grant, the amounts, kind of the where we were, where we could be going, included old templates. All of this is kind of old news, we'll say. It's the original PowerPoint. So what the committee did today is, and you can pass that one, and you can go past that one, That one you can go past. Yep, great. Keep going. Right there. Key questions. So with our time, we talked through some of the key questions and tried to give suggestions for the full board to consider. And so the Finance Committee thought that it should be called the Charter School Startup and Implementation Grants. They really thought that we should award and manage the grant Startup and Satellites as 2-year grants, large school expansion, small school expansion, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, but it's kind of morphed into just school expansion, which is cool, which includes large and small school. And then innovation grants is the collection of the flexibility that's been offered with the recent USB. And again, that's the new curriculum, new programs, and new innovative practices. So another key question, should we keep it simple? We already were moving this way. I remember Vice Chair Phillips, for example, just making a statement at the last meeting that keeping it simple, silly would be a good idea. We had the opportunity to make it really elaborate, and the Finance Committee just weighed in on that again and said, yep. Should we use enrollment as the primary driver? Staff had a little bit different, and it was great to get the Finance Subcommittee's kind of recommendations. We talked through that today, and it was really helpful, really helpful. And where we ended was a suggestion to the full board that for Startup and Satellite, yes, that's the primary driver, and it's also a big factor. It may not be the only factor. There might be other things that need to be considered, but for school expansion. And it should not be, enrollment is not a factor for the collection of innovation grants at the end. So we kind of worked through that question. It was fun to ask questions and work through questions together. Should we make an adjustment to the original grant amount? Here's another one where we started off kind of with a no, but when we go to the Excel, the Finance Committee suggested that we take into consider inflation. So when the Excel pulls up, we'll kind of show you our progress on that front. So the answer here was, yeah, we should probably make a modest adjustment to allow for inflation for the, for the new and the satellite and those things. Should we incorporate large schools and small school expansions? Yes, they're prioritized along with new and satellite schools. There's some suggested amounts that we'll see on the Excel slide soon. We kept asking questions. Should we incorporate implementing a new curriculum? Yes, and that's prioritized after the new schools. I mean, we don't want to spend out all of the money for the collection of innovation grants only to find ourselves with no funds for the new and for the satellite and for the expansion, school expansions. So it's prioritized afterwards. Other key questions, maybe one or two left. Should we keep, revise, or create new processes? Keep for new and satellite. That's kind of like once approved, you're eligible for this. It's kind of a right? Here's the cause and here's the effect. And so that makes sense to keep that. However, adopting a process and training for school expansion and innovation grants. And that was a great thing that we worked through this morning in our in the meeting, and I just helped facilitate that. Should the grant processes be competitive or first applications in and approved go out? First in, first awarded. However, a real making sure that everybody's aware of the opportunity. There's a lot of over communication on that, along with some training and some professional development, information sessions, things like that, so that all schools have an equal opportunity to get in. And time, we need the little time frames in there. So should we spend the entire carry forward in school fiscal year 2024? I recall the board and then the Finance Committee just reiterated it that no, we don't want to just use it all, but we want to use the resources that we have as good stewards, but also as efficiently as we can. It's important, but don't spend it all right away, right? Let's be planned on it. How do we keep funding levels sustainable? Proper budgeting, planning. Cindy just was talking about all the work that she as a member does at the Capitol, and that, I hang out there a few days and our association and the Charter Network all are advocating for dollars and the resources that we can show the impact. And that's another thing that's on us, is to demonstrate the impact of the dollars. When could the changes become effective? For the satellite, the large school expansions, January 2024. So we kind of can go retro back to there, but not all the way back to the small school expansions. So the next one is called CHSU Restricted Grant, updated after committee input. So here, taking what the Finance Committee worked on this morning, staff, Lisa worked in, and Marie, if you remember what I just said, like they were looking for and thought that it would be good for the whole board to consider an inflation adjustment. So that could be something like if you plugged into C2, like 5% increase, Marie, if you have that up. And it's just an easy tool that we're going to need to meet again, and it just flows through. So we're going to be able to do our work together pretty quickly to kind of see, and it's not a material difference, but it will be for a school, right? It's not material to our overall planning and the carry forward that we have or the ongoing funds that we have, but it could be a material difference for schools that are new. And so that's really wise. We're going to work on that percent number still, but you can see that we've now have a tool that just kind of builds it out so that we can quickly discuss it and work it through. And then the other change for now is in the highlighted down below. I think we're going to start to refer them as school expansion grant funds and not just large school and small school. It was separated out, but instead an opportunity to kind of put those together, which is really good, and then to have a range, because some may need 50,000, some may need 88,000, and some may need 200,000, and that's where a process, like I was earlier discussing, is important, and a process to understand what the need is, so we don't just flat rate dole out money, but we know what it's going for. I thought that was cool. And then a range also for the collection of, we'll call them innovation grants, because some schools may have just a very small project of 1,000 and some may have something larger of $50,000 up to. That would be a maximum. So I hope Finance Committee that this captured some of our discussion, and now we're a work in progress. I think we're going to need to meet again. We'll add Eric Olson, Member Olson, to that. He just was absent, as we know, but we can do it remote, and I'll be happy to help facilitate again or turn it over, whatever the committee thinks is the right thing to do. And there's one more, perhaps, and I'll go quickly through it. We do have, when it was brought up today, to have a process for informing and for professional development. We actually do have a draft as staff, and I just didn't get a chance to share it with the Finance Committee. So that'll be another thing that we're working on. And it includes, things like an information session, Charter School Startup and Implementation Grants 101. And our new strategic position that we just hired can help us facilitate that. There are other steps to this process, and it kind of culminates at the end. And it's not too burdensome, I don't think, and it's definitely has room for our Finance Committee to input and tweak and things like that. But it's a starting place, right? So we give you, and so at the very end, one more, that we even get cohort-based learning and how we disseminate it. And that's how we can, work together. So there's a startup process, like a information session at the very beginning, an application process, and then a cohort and how the use of the funds gets disseminated to the public and to others. So a jumping off place. So I think that we got great input from the whole board in the last January meeting. I think that we continuously improved with the work of the Finance Committee today and with staff. They were in between making changes here. And we look forward to, in March, after we have one more Finance Committee meeting remote, kind of presenting something that the board could then entertain for action. So.
That report. Thank you for the report. And others from the board, any questions, things you want to discuss relative to this, knowing it's ongoing work, and we appreciate that. Yeah, thank you so much.
I actually do have one thing.
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to make clear that as we discussed discuss expansion requests, that we traditionally have thought about expansion requests in terms of adding students or grade levels. But we would like to look at things like physical facilities expansions that may not be impacted by or may not involve adding more students. So when we're talking about expansion, it's more than just headcount.
Thank you. And could be expansion of programs or kinds of things that go on in the school as well. Thank you. Yeah, better a definition. Member Cisneros.
I just have a request of staff, and if they'll just put their operators' hats back on. The innovation grants in the past were up to $100,000, so they've been cut in half, and yet the work now has increased. And even though the phrase was, it doesn't seem too laborious, although that's my own word, not yours. Most of the people applying for this, I mean, just managing Utah grants needs a full FTE anyways, right? And so I don't want schools to be discouraged from wanting to do something innovative because I'm thinking of one that USBE released that they just had to extend the timeline, I'm guessing because nobody applied for it, because of the amount of work entailed and what they're asking to do for the amount of money. And it's just like, I don't want to feel like one more thing. And so I'm afraid if there's too much of a process to it, people are going to say, it's not worth my money, it's not worth my time to go out and experiment, I'll just do it for free. So I just would put that caution out as you reflect on being an operator, what that feels like.
Thank you. Thank you for that caution.
Fantastic
reminder.
input. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Vice Chair Phillips, yeah.
So, along those same lines, when a legislative audit was done a few years ago about reports and requirements, it was determined they stopped counting after 350 for public schools, for public LEAs. But they did note in it that charters had many more than the regular public districts.
That's right.
And so, and those were directly related to authorizers and their requests. So one of the things that we've been trying to do, and I would just encourage staff to do that as well, is to be sensitive to the very circumstances described by Member Cisneros, which is that to the extent that we can get what we need to evaluate in a way that maybe is not as time consuming, is not as involved as because I liken it to busy work for your students. There is some work you can assign that is extremely efficient, and some things you can do that assess your students very well and very quickly, right? And I know I'm speaking to teachers. And you don't need a big list that gives you no more value than those two small things would have done, or those two very efficient things would have done. So to the extent that we can still get what we need, make the determinations we need to determine without adding to the reports and requirements, and even reducing reports and requirements, because we have Representative Pulsifer, who's been pushing for that for us. Board leadership at the USBE has been pushing for that under Chair Moss's leadership. And so we don't want to be, the cog in the wheel on that one. We want to be just the oil, right? So let's just make sure that, and we've been behind the push for that with our associations. So it'd be great if nothing we do ever leans us back into that space, but pushes us into that other space.
Well said, and thank you both, Member Cisneros, Vice Chair Phillips, for that reminder. I think you've articulated what the rest of us believe as well, and thank you for that. And the good news is I've seen Dr. Kramer several times now in his presentations include the acronym of KISS. So I know that he believes that we should be as simple, it should be as simple as possible as well, and that it makes monies possible for folks to do good things. Yeah, thank you for those cautions. Any additional thoughts relative to that? Thanks. And I know we're going to hear more because it's in process today, so we don't need to take an action today because it's just an update at this point. In the future, that could happen. So let's move now to small expansion process. Ms. Stephenson.
Thank you, Chair. As we begin, there was some feedback from our last meeting. One of the first pieces we wanted to talk about was just some of the terminology and making sure we're all using those same terms. So we put on the agenda today the word process. And that's going to be a term that Dr. Kramer has suggested that we continue to use, and that the word process will refer to these groups of the three things, policy, procedure, and forms, and that we expect that if we bring a process to the board, that it will include these three sets of things. In the past, we've at times just brought a policy or just brought a procedure or just brought a form, and that has led to some disjointed pieces of processes. And so we're hoping that by ensuring that every process has these three pieces, a policy, a procedure, and a form to go along with it, that will help make our processes cleaner and easier to follow. And so I believe that some of the question that had come up at our last or our December meeting when we had discussed this process last time was if we needed to approve each item separately. It was our understanding that that could be an option to approve a policy and a procedure and a form separately, or to approve a process as a whole. And so that would be then at the discretion of the board, how they would like to proceed with that. So since we are looking today at the small expansion process, which is returning with your other recommendations, we have updated the policy and the procedure. The form has not been updated as it already reflected your feedback, but the policy and procedure have received updates to align with what was in the form, and so the process is what is now presented. So I will pull up the policy first. Overall, what the board brought up in December and wanted to have reflected, we tried to capture in a simple sentence, keeping it simple, silly, as we brought up. And it is found in this last sentence here. It was really capturing that notion that with whatever the board was looking at, that it was clear to everyone that the board could look at any relevant information as needed when they are considering a small expansion request or a small expansion procedure. And so the sentence just reads, in evaluating a small expansion request, SCSB may consider any relevant information, including without limitation, any notation by SCSB staff of the conditions identified in SCSB's small expansion procedure. So that has now been written into our policy, if that is something the board approves of. And then that same sentence has been included in the procedure document as well. So it outlines the different pieces that the application will go through with that final notation there, reminding applicants that the board may consider any relevant information while making that decision regarding their small expansion request. And that is the update that we are presenting for the board.
Thoughts? Anyone?
I'm just trying to wrap my brain around, because the discussion in the Finance Committee this morning around kind of the problems with this distinction of what a small expansion request is. And so I'm kind of need to come back to what the law actually states, or the rule. Like, is the rule, did we basically just restate the rule, or do we have some leeway to perhaps redefine? Because I think we both felt that it would be very beneficial towards for us and for schools, for us to look at these as not you're a small expansion, you're a large expansion, you fall in these different buckets, but more of a range kind of approach to it. There was a question in there somewhere.
Chair, may I answer that question? So I pulled back up the policy. The policy shares that definition that comes from board rule. And so the definition is found in this A, B, and C right here. It's between 50 and 100 students, does not necessitate a significant renovation, and is for no more than one additional grade. That is a board rule.
I'm not drifting off to sleep when I turn around. I really am drifting to think about, could that sentence be written a little more concisely? It's hard for me to read it smoothly. That's the English teacher in me. And that last, to convey the meaning. I'm just wondering if it can achieve the purpose, but may consider, I don't know if we need including without limitation, just that we would consider this is something else that we would consider, that in evaluating a small expansion request, SCSB may consider any relevant information, including conditions noted by the SCSB staff identified in our small expansion procedure. It just seems a little, it seems a little bit twisted and wordy. So here's also Member Bassett, who's an English teacher, who can help me with that. Do you see what I'm meaning? Or the rest of you say, hey, we got it just fine. Your brain's not thinking well. I want it just to read smoothly and easily.
What brought us to this?
I think we're just, yeah. We were trying to, my estimation, that not only should we follow, we want to consider the elements of the request, but we also want all of our team to be willing to say, here are some other conditions that you might consider that you haven't considered. We just want to make you aware of these things. Am I off base by saying what I believe the intent is?
No, I think you captured the intent perfectly, and I think you also know each other so well. As this was reviewed by a committee when we were doing committee work, and then afterwards, you picked up that our board member Olson had some suggested language here, and so
He suggested that way.
yes,
I'm going to work with him on
which
legalese,
is
because sometimes
so you picked up legal language.
legalese it becomes convoluted when it could just be a little more simply. That's the English teacher in me,
And
not
he did say, feel free to change this, but we did just plug in the language that Member Olson had suggested.
the intent. I fully support. And if we understand this, then we're okay with that. I'm just thinking there may be a smoother way to write it. I mean, you would need to cover, if you're writing a legal contract, you'd need to say without limitation, you need to say some other pieces that have protections in the law. And I'm not sure this is that at that same level. That's just me. I'm making a big deal out of nothing. So it took me a minute to wrap my head around it, the intent. All right, but if everyone else is okay, we want an action item. This is to approve that language, right? To approve the sentence.
We're happy to
Until
have
I
it
have
or
a better
to fix
suggestion
it.
at this point, I'm going to just leave it alone then.
Chair, can I just
Yes,
make my own
please.
comment on it?
Yes, please.
I agree with what you're saying. You could make that smoother. You don't need the language of including without limitation. However, if the intent is to identify some specific areas, like with the staff that you would consider, then I think that's the intent of trying to name the staff. But I agree with you. You could make that simpler and it'd be fine.
Member
I just
Cisneros?
don't want to make staff have to do it again. So can I just make a motion and we all say we know what it means and we'll be okay with that? I feel your pain, Marie. So I want
know,
to
it's
just make a
just the
motion and just.
the English teacher in me, I would make my students rewrite that. So that it would say something that may consider any relevant information, including conditions identified by SCSB staff or something. All right, do you see what I mean? I think it's a little convoluted. All right, but as long as we understand what it means, that's the important part, and we're accomplishing our purpose. That's the important part. So you don't have to rewrite it for me. It's just my English teacher brain. Go ahead, Michelle.
I agree with your English teacher brain. However, comma, I agree more strongly.
Semicolon, however, comma.
However, comma, I would, my kids always make fun of me for saying however, comma, but they
Yeah.
all do it. So when
Yeah,
they're right.
that's right.
I think that the legalese is actually useful in this case in protecting us as we make decisions.
All right.
So I would just retain it the way it
Let's
is.
move forward. Let's continue to move forward. Do we have a motion that?
I would like to make a motion that we approve the small expansion process as presented.
All right. And I fully support the intent, so I'm not going to mess with that. Do we have a second to that motion?
I will second the motion.
Second from Vice Chair Phillips. So motion from Member Cisneros, second from Vice Chair Phillips. Any further discussion other than what I've already said and I've already acquiesced, so we're good. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right,
Aye.
we'll go ahead. Thank you so much for that work. And the intent is good. We do want, because sometimes our team see things that may not be in the exact chunks of the application and can give us some additional insight that will be very helpful in approving or not approving. Yes, please.
Ms. Stephenson made the point that the form was not yet ready. Can we just direct staff to move forward with the form as long as the form is in line with the approved process and procedure and that we don't need to see the form in the future?
I'm good with that. Are you making a motion to that end?
Yeah, I can make, the form didn't need any updates. It
So
all
we're fine.
was good. Thank
Okay.
you.
So we're okay. You're all right with that, Member Cisneros? Then all right. Let's continue then. All right. Any other discussion around the small expansion review? All right. Let's move then to, we're at that time of year. Everyone's renewing their new schedule. Theaters and other companies are sending out ticket requests. This is their new season. So we are at that point. We're going to review our 2024-2025 season, which begins August 1, because July, we typically don't meet in July. So it is kind of a fiscal year, July, but we know we don't meet in July. So, Ms. Stephenson, unveiling of our season dates then.
Ta-da! So these are the proposed board meeting dates that we'd like you to consider. As Chair Bowles mentioned, it skips July, as you typically like to do. The ones to note are January and March, where you would be meeting on the third week, as the USBE is meeting on the second week those months with their legislative meeting conflicts that occur then. But all the rest of them would be on the second Thursday, as you typically have. And so we present these dates for your consideration.
All regular second week Thursdays with those two exceptions, partially because USBE in January also meets with other school boards in that first week or so of January. They have meetings and the legislative session begins. But March 20th give us time to be out of the legislative session next year to review legislative action. Well, it's going to need to, because we don't want to, I think, go later in the month than that, but that'll be pretty close, enough to give us time. I'm looking ahead. Yeah, oh yeah, it will be out of the legislative session by that point. Any discussion relative to this calendar All right, regular meeting times with the exception of January and March, then that will be in the third week. And so may I have a motion to adopt the calendar if you so choose?
This won't affect me since I will be gone. But in the absence of anyone else making a motion, I will move that we adopt the State Charter School Board regular meeting calendar as it has been presented.
All right, motion
And
to
I will
approve.
second that. I too will not be here and would happy to put my, thumbprint on that.
All right, motion to approve by Member Smith and second by Vice Chair Phillips. Knowing that they say that, but when they conclude their service at the end of the fiscal year, they both know that. They're way too eager for that to end, I want you to know, because we were just going to maybe keep it all a secret and just not let anyone know the difference and keep going. But we will want them to join us probably in a meeting early in this calendar so that we can recognize their service as well. So don't think that you don't need to note any of those meeting times because you do. So we have a motion and a second. I'm suspecting we've had all the discussion we need relative to it. So all those in favor of the motion to approve this calendar, say aye. Aye. And any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. I'm hearing Stephanie. Was that you, Stephanie?
It is. I'm out in the ethos.
We
Thanks,
are so
everybody.
glad to have you here. And see, we all brightened to hear your voice. So we're glad to
Oh
have
my
you.
gosh, you all are sweet, and
Yeah.
thank you for your flexibility. And Member Phillips, I'll follow up with you. I really appreciated your overview of the session, just to touch base with you moving forward over the next couple weeks.
Fabulous. So did you join it? So we can make note when you joined us and know that you're here. Did
I
you?
was here I
Came
was
right
here this
after
morning,
lunch?
and then I came right back in after lunch. Yeah.
Oh, so fabulous. So great to have you with us. So it's good to hear your voice. All right.
Thanks. I miss being with all of you in person.
We like having you here too. We'll look forward to you being with us next month then. All right. Let's move then to discussion and action item around board retreat professional development. Ms. Stephenson, again, our last scheduled action item.
Thank you, Chair. All right. We wanted to bring a few ideas to the board as far as board retreat and professional learning opportunities, and see if there's anything that the board is interested in and how the board would like to proceed. We centered them around kind of three different areas that the board may want to consider. We have team building ideas, professional learning, and then authorizer specific learning opportunities. So as a reminder, we did a team building activity, and that was part of what we did in December as our kind of winter holiday activity. We engaged in some fun together. I laugh about some of our games that we played, and that was really fun together. I did put a picture of the rope there because we also had some learning that we did and coming together. For this, we engaged with Onyx Offsites. This just as a reason to consider engaging in additional team building activities. They talk about how team building can strengthen our culture as well as job satisfaction, both for employees as well as for board members. Having that deep connection can help us feel that meaning behind our work. It helps us to both internally and externally develop with each other, as well as have a continued learning process. I really liked that last sentence too. The camaraderie that is drawn from a lighthearted day, creating shared memories, can provide a platform for discussion, reflection, and change. And maybe that's my quadrant of the rope speaking there, but definitely enjoyed that day and the time to reflect together. Onyx has reached out and has presented a few different ideas. As we've talked about potential things that are coming this year, for your consideration, we could do something as we approach the end of term for some of our board members and kind of celebrating, the work that has been accomplished over the years together. We could do something in the fall, celebrating new members that are coming on and building some team camaraderie there. We could also look at doing a holiday retreat or team building again, or any combination of those things. So that's one piece that can be considered. Then on the other side of that, there's always opportunities for professional learning. In the past, we've engaged with the National Charter School Institute, and at NACSA this past year, we were able to re-engage with them and talk about picking back up with some professional learning. They have said, you know, we don't really do the team building thing, so if you'd like that, maybe, you know, bring in Onyx for some of that, or, you know, you could combine some of these options, but that they can really help us around, you know, continuing with strategic plans, analyzing and evaluating things that are happening within our portfolio, balancing support and accountability, strengthening relationships between authorizer, board, and schools, and then aligning governance and operations. They have lots of different professional learning opportunities, and it would all be customized to the needs of the board and what they would like to, or what you would like to have happen there. That would again be something that we could look at doing, you know, as we're wrapping up things this spring, and or looking at it in the fall. Many opportunities that exist there, but are more in the governance and authorizing side of the work that we do. And then we also have our authorizer specific options. The two that we wanted to highlight are A-Game and NACSA. A-Game is specifically looking at some alternative options, and I pulled their mission statement right there. It says A-Game creates responsive goals that are designed to capture all student learning, and so it's not just a focus on the state assessments and traditional measurements, but what else we can look at as authorizers. They have a few virtual convenings that are coming up, and then an in-person event that will occur in May in Chicago. And I know at NACSA, Chair Bowles and a few staff members, we were able to sit in on an A-Game session, and he leaned over and said, we should look into this really seriously. So if that's something that as a board we would like to consider, we can send out that information and start getting people registered for those virtual convenings, as well as that in-person event, and start bringing that work into the work that our board does, as well as NACSA. If that's something that we would like to continue to attend, we do have the dates and the location, so that we can start getting travel arranged for that. It will be the 21st through 24th of October in Houston, Texas. So lots of options, and recognizing that we've got time and things to arrange with travel or with presenters, and I would love to have some direction from our board as to what you would like to do with your retreats and professional learning.
Thank you so much. And I think it's not too early to be planning it. The time goes quickly, and for folks to look at calendars and make sure those are planned and things that we might need. So let's have some discussion. Anyone have any reactions to any of those items? I'll start with, I think really important that we continue to attend NACSA. It's very useful for us to do that, particularly, unfortunately, if we have unfortunately to lose Member Smith, Vice Chair Phillips. But if we have new members, I think they both would agree that we should have them, the two new members, attend NACSA. And it's not only going into the meetings, but then when we talk about what we've heard in the meetings and we come back here and do that's really an important element of our work. So I for one, would like to continue that. And Ms. Stephenson indicated that I was very impressed with the A-Game. If there are some who can do that, particularly even if it's Dr. Kramer and Ms. Stephenson, members of our our staff who can go to some of those, and there may be others of you in your schedules that would allow you to do that. I would go in a heartbeat to the A game things. I know I couldn't over those particular dates, but maybe to tune in virtually I could, but not to attend in Chicago. But others may. It was very impressive the things that they are doing relative to strengthening authorizers in their work with schools. So I start with that. As far as team building, I thought last December was fun for us all to do, especially when we're giving clues and saying the little kid in Muppet Christmas Carol as opposed to Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. I just love that we said that, how pop culture just rules our lives. It was Muppet Christmas Carol more than Charles Dickens. I love that. And some of the other things we've done, and we didn't really ever get to complete much interaction with the National Charter School. I think the team did more than the board did, and it's because we had some other things happen at the time we'd planned with them, and therefore that kind of took priority, and we may or may not want to continue, but just to start the discussion. So those are my reactions to each of those pieces. If others have thoughts you want to lend. Would you like to continue to, let me start with NACSA. Are you feeling like that's something everyone would like to continue? I don't know if we need to take a formal vote, but can in this meeting get a sense of what we're interested in, if that's okay. All right. NACSA, are you all feeling like, let's start there.
I feel like NACSA is super valuable. I don't know that my opinion really matters since I won't be here.
It does matter because you have that experience and would know that someone new coming in, you want them to try to step up to do as well as you have done in this position. And
Hopefully
so,
better. I would encourage especially new members to attend NACSA if it's at all possible. The A game training, I feel the same about. I think the Onyx training, I missed half of it. I think it was fun. I don't know how valuable it was, other than fun is in and of itself valuable. And the National Charter School, what's the name of the organization?
Yeah.
I don't know that we gave them a really fair evaluation because it was crisis time at that point.
Yeah.
But once again, I'm not sure how much value that whole experience added.
thank you for that input. Yeah, I feel similarly. Others? Is there anything you would say definitely we should exclude? We're not interested in that, or seeing that it would be useful to us? Any of those pieces? Yeah,
This is Stephanie,
please.
or Member Spiker.
Yeah, please, Stephanie, go ahead, and then Member Cisneros after that.
Oh, great. I am eager to attend NACSA. Oh my gosh.
That one.
Anyway, you know the conference. Sorry. I obviously need some more caffeine, but I think I have already spoken with folks at Weber State that I won't be attending the Adobe Education Conference. It always seems to overlap that this year. So that's a goal for me. And
Great.
I would like to offer that I'm happy to spearhead or lead out on a proposal for us to present.
Ah, great. Okay,
Yes, and
All right.
that's one of ours in our strategic plan.
absolutely.
Yeah. that's totally in our plan.
So I will start, when I see everybody in person next month, I'll start researching that in terms of, I haven't seen a call for proposals yet, but I'm happy to take the lead and include us all, but I'm happy to take the lead on that.
Relative
just
to
build that
all of
momentum.
these options. Okay, now I'm seeing signals because I was looking at you, which really I'm looking at, it says USBE Media. So I'm not seeing you, but I think Member Cisneros and maybe Member Bassett both had something to add, and then let's come to a conclusion as you go through that.
We were just looking across the table at each other because we have had that discussion of not just attending NACSA, but contributing our knowledge. And so I just want to say out loud that I would love to contribute as well where I can.
All right. And Member Spiker, that's what you're talking about, a proposal to potentially present at that conference?
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
And it would be, and
maybe
I'm,
that's something we could,
yeah, I was just going to say, on Member Spiker's behalf, if I can speak for her, and she's not saying it, but all of us would be good to be a part of that. But if she could be the lead in doing that, Member Spiker, I'm thinking that also is helpful for you to have a conference in which you've presented, and you could take the lead in doing that.
Sure.
True?
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to do
I'm
that.
looking
and
at
I
it from
think-
a higher ed perspective.
Oh, yeah,
and-
totally.
yeah. So,
Tenure? Yeah, no.
yeah.
No, that's great. And I was just going to comment that if potentially, maybe we could add that as a discussion item for our March meeting, just to discuss potential topics that we feel like our expertise
Yeah.
really lies, that we would want to share with others. And then in the
Fabulous.
meantime, over the next month, I'll check dates for the proposal submission and
All
so
right.
on.
So will you place, I won't be here in March, but Vice Chair Phillips will lead through that agenda. So will you please place on the agenda, though, Member Spiker, relative to a proposal at NACSA for, and engage others. And I'm hearing Member Bassett saying, Member Spiker, that she would love to work with you on that and be a part of that proposal as well. Is that
Awesome.
all right? So that'll be tremendous. So maybe it sounds to me like everyone is very interested in NACSA, and as we add new members, we will say, "Oh, your comment? Okay, I'll come back." As we maybe do your comment first because it may alter what I'll say. Yeah.
I support Member Smith in saying NACSA is very valuable for new members. I think it reaches a saturation point at maybe your second to 2.5 times. And that's having looked at it both from staff perspective and board member perspective. I don't feel like outside of if there was a presentation that this last time to Oakland was really worth my time, if I'm completely honest. So I feel like I would not, unless we were presenting, be interested in Houston because it does reach that saturation point for what do I gain out of it. I was not around for Charter School Institute. However, I was very impressed with the conversations that we had with them. And I did enjoy a session they attended. So if there's still some type of agreement or something that we feel like we can learn from them, I think there's some areas for our board in the area of just really explicit training around evaluation and making sure that we're consistent in our application of governance, et cetera. As far as A game, who is the target audience for that learning so that we know who on the board maybe is best? I'm able to support staff in going May 2nd and 3rd. That's finals week, so I don't have to be around. I don't take finals anymore, hallelujah. So I can support that, but I don't know if I'm necessarily the right audience for that training.
I think you'd find you are. Ms. Stephenson, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, my understanding is both staff and board members is the target audience. On both of these, staff, we could put together some additional information and send that to emails, and that way people can check calendars and take some additional time to consider those dates, since these ones would require travel, where the other ones would require travel from presenters versus us.
So let me make a kind of just a consensus approval proposal today. So you'd vote for yourselves individually. So I'm not hearing anyone saying, let's not do this necessarily, but some may be more valuable for you personally than others may be. It sounds like we would like to, though we've said for some time, make a proposal, present at NACSA, and I think we continue wanting to share and have a presentation. So Member Spiker has agreed to leave that on the agenda along with Member Bassett for March meeting. So if we'll continue to do that. Then Ms. Stephenson, Dr. Kramer can poll members of the board relative to whether or not you would like to attend or not. And it may help to see as it gets closer, who the keynote is, what are some of the breakout sessions, and if we're presenting, we may need you to help us I think you can do more than that. we need you to help to may need you to help to present, and we'll want to immediately, as we have new members, to include them, particularly around NACSA, so they meet other authorizers and hear kind of how that's happening around the nation, because we are in a unique position, but we can learn from other authorizers and what they're looking at. Because sometimes I think, oh, I like that they're doing. Sometimes I think, why would you do that? Why are you? And sometimes you learn more from that. Why are you doing that than from what someone is doing? So for those pieces, how about if you, for those who would like to send out a poll for those who would like to attend a game, then you could make arrangements for those with a little description, if that is useful to you, and you say, hey, yeah, I am interested. I would go. If I knew those dates were available for me, in a heartbeat, I'd do a game, because I see the value in it and how it can influence our schools and be good for them. And then the other, National Charter School Institute, what I'm hearing, the element of what they do is the evaluation process, primarily evaluating how we're serving schools better, what their perceptions are of how we're working with them. Am I accurate in saying that? That's at least what I heard. So at least that part of it, if you'd work with National Charter School Institute around particularly that evaluation piece and how schools are perceiving our work and what we can do to improve to better partner with them and develop those relationships, that part of it, not to exclude anything else, but that one particularly we're interested in, and maybe have some discussion with them and bring that back for us to consider. And then as far as team building, I think we enjoyed it, and maybe it's again another end of the calendar year kind of thing that we could do again that was useful and fun. It was actually fun. So I'm going to leave it with March. We'll have a more concrete discussion about NACSA. The other things, kind of poll folks and see where they are, and we'll kind of gather individually, be able to respond individually back, and then we can report it back in this meeting where we are. Does that sound good? All right? Okay, that sounds tremendous. And thanks, Member Spiker, for leading in that NACSA for us. And I would, and of course, stay close to Member Bassett. She's a smart one. She's the one I would immediately, I'd say, hey, what should we do? How can we do that?
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Any other discussion relative to that professional development, that portion of our meeting, board retreat? Well, we are supposed to adjourn at 3. Should I stretch for an hour?
That's not like you anyway.
No, it's not like me. I'd rather say, okay, we're done. And so I'm waiting for one last motion.
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn from Member Smith. We are now adjourned at 1:53 p.m. on February 8th. Thank you all. Back in March, right? Remember, we go back. We're on the third Thursday, March 21st. We're back. Okay? And thanks in advance, Vice Chair Phillips, for doing that.
I know. You want to
March
try to
21st.
do